from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Welcome to the CoCo Crew Podcast. A delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information. Featuring the Tandy Color Computer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
CoCo.
All right. Welcome, CoCo Cruisers. You are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, episode number 62. Wow, that is a big number. What do you think, Neil? Do you think we're going to get to this? We're almost to retirement age now with this, huh?
I can't believe
That's exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
Still going.
Yeah, well, I think my grandparents were allowed to retire at 62. My parents maybe have to go to 65, but I'm pretty sure mine says 67. So we got at least until 67 before I can retire, I guess. Huh? Anyway, well, what a month coming up. Yet another month of COVID quarantine or whatever. Hopefully some people are getting in some good CoCo time or whatever. Still kind of eluding me. I think it's partly from being depressed or whatever of all the crappiness in the world. But, you know, I try to at least keep up with the news. One thing to mention, coming up probably the day that this is released to the public or thereabouts on July the 31st, that'll be the 40th anniversary of the introduction of the Tandy Color Computer. Well, the TRS-80 Color Computer along with the Model 3 and the Pocket Computer 1. That's according to TRS-80.org. Hooray, hooray, 40 years, practically my whole life. Maybe not quite, but a long time to have the CoCo in my life, so that's pretty exciting.
And they're still working.
Yeah, most of them at least.
That's right. Yeah.
It's funny, you know, you read on like Facebook or whatever, you'd think these were tender, careful, turn to dust when you touch them things, or the way some people talk about them. I saw somebody said, I'm afraid to turn mine off and on. I want a hard reset switch. Because, you know, because some apps can, of course, hijack the reset switch for the soft reset.
I have some advice for that person. The only thing to fear is fear itself.
Yeah, well, I think probably so. I mean, who knows, right? You turn the power off and on. I mean, that's probably the most likely time you'll have a problem with the power supply, but it doesn't seem like something that happens a lot to me, at least. Anyway, end of July, CoCo Fest. I missed the last Glenside meeting, so I don't know if there's been any new updates there. Last I heard, they were hoping to get in with VCF Midwest, which, of course, was canceled. So, as far as I know, there's still no word on any CoCo Fest for 2020. We do have dates for CoCo Fest 2021. I'm not sure how much longer it's worth holding out for 2020, but life goes on, I suppose. Tandy Assembly is still, it'll be 3 months away. We're hoping that's still going to happen. There's a survey sent out from an organization committee asking about who will actually go. So if you'd like to go to Tandy Assembly and you want it to actually occur, you may want to make sure to check your email for that survey and respond so that we have some idea that you might be coming. I think currently as it stands, there's rules in place in Ohio that would make that untenable. And maybe that'll change, but it needs to change pretty quickly for that to be something we can plan around. All right. Well, good news to all then, huh? So, anybody got a cool project going on? Anything fun or exciting happening?
I got to spend a lot of time working on my CoCo. You know, just using it this weekend and brushing up on getting ready to rev up for maybe some programming projects. And so, yeah, fun to get to spend a lot of quality time with it.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I need to I keep letting things back up on me. And so it's like, well, I can't, I've got a little spare time, but I need to go ahead and pay the bills for the month, or I've got to go ahead and fix that thing that's broken in the back door, or, you know, whatever. And so not having much free time to actually just do CoCo stuff, but still hoping maybe it'll happen.
It's July.
What about any acquisitions? Who's gotten something cool lately? Anything? I picked up off of eBay two. They're young kid books, basically from back in the 80s that are, kind of like choose your own adventure style books or whatever. That's these are called the Bites Brothers, and they have like computer programs as part of the, the activity. You type in stuff from the book to do things or whatever. There's a series of them. I think I'm not sure how many actually, 6 or 8, 10 maybe. I don't know. These are only the first two. I haven't got through them yet. I haven't let it become a new collecting obsession yet, but it probably will. So if you have any Bites Brothers books, feel free to contact me. I'll send you my address and you can ship them, and I'll be happy to thank you on the air. Yeah, that's kind of the only thing really going on big time lately. I still need to go through the pile of boxes that the Boise liberated from his collection for me.
Yep, you need to do that. Might be some sweet potatoes in there.
Yeah, I did open the boxes because I was afraid he'd have strawberries in there.
That's an old joke for anybody listening.
So, anyone else have any new acquisitions or anything? Dog Days of Summer got us down. It has been hot. Ooh, hot.
Yeah, here too, yeah. Big time. Big time.
Oh my God, turn the fan off, turn the hairdryer off when I walk outside.
even been hot over here, and that's rare.
Yeah. I guess that's our introduction. Maybe not as inspiring as we would like, but that's what we got this month.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Well, we take a break, regroup, and we'll be back with some announcements.
So what did you want to show me?
Check this out. I do this poke, and the printer is now at 9600.
Yeah, that's a popular one.
And I wrote this little program to do all these pokes to give me access to 40-track drives.
Yeah?
And this one lets me access both sides of the drive.
Okay.
And this utility automatically creates line numbers for me in BASIC.
You do know that all these things are built into ADOS, don't you?
Huh?
Have you been living in a cave somewhere? ADOS adds all sorts of cool functions to your color computer. All the things you described and more. It even supports true lowercase on the new CoCo 2s.
You're kidding me.
ADOS adds things like repeat key so you can edit your last command, DOS command for OS 9, error trapping in BASIC, there's a RAM command to run in full RAM mode, 2 column disk directories, keyword abbreviation, and that doesn't even scratch the surface of the features of ADOS.
That sounds easier than all these pokes and short utility programs.
You better believe it. And ADOS comes with an easy-to-use configuration program. You just run it, enable the things you want, ignore what you don't want.
That sounds great.
You can run ADOS from disk, or you can have ADOS create a ROM image, and you can just burn that onto a ROM and put it on your disk controller, so it boots up right into ADOS every time you boot your CoCo. Imagine, you never have to set your baud rate again.
Wow, that's amazing. Will it work with my CoCo 1?
ADOS works with both CoCo 1 and CoCo 2 systems, and it's available for just $27.95. You'll wonder how you ever lived without it.
Supercharge your color computer with ADOS from Spectro Systems. Spectro Systems, Miami, Florida.
Okay, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back. Now it's time for some announcements. You are, of course, listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are available on Twitter as a Twitter handle at CoCo Crew Podcast. That's @ CoCoCrewPodcast. If you like to tweet, feel free to tweet at us, and we may tweet back. We've not yet gotten a Parler account, but I've been thinking about it, so I'll let you know if that happens. That may be too political. I don't know. We, of course, also have a Facebook page available. So if you're on the Book of Faces, come and check us out. Our Facebook page, the CoCo Crew Podcast. Oh, that's 4 separate words. Come and join the group. Keep up with the newest announcements. Maybe occasionally a little news that's side channel for the podcast, or maybe occasionally a little jump ahead of the crowd. Learn some stuff and be cool. All right. Of course, we are a podcast, so of course we have our RSS feed available at cococrew.org, which works with most podcatchers. But we are, of course, also available through Apple Podcasts or Google Play for normal podcast downloads. And if you prefer to stream, we are available through Spotify, with Stitcher, and, of course, TuneIn. So if you are an Alexa user, you can say, Alexa, play CoCo Crew Podcast, and, you might be surprised what happens. Of course, we've been taking our audio podcasts and converting them to a video form and posting them on YouTube, feel free to look for us on YouTube. The biggest advantage there is YouTube does a pretty good job producing subtitles for the podcast. So if you have trouble with accents, or maybe if English is not your first language, sometimes it's helpful to have the subtext there to read. Then it may enhance your enjoyment to be able to check it out, the podcast on the video version. So check us out on YouTube. Remain as a member of the Throwback Network. This is a collection of retro-themed podcasts. It includes both technology and 80s culture and other kind of retro-themed podcasts. So if you're caught up with the CoCo Crew Podcast and looking for something else to listen to, then we recommend that you check out the Throwback Network. We are also listed on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. This is also a list of retro-themed podcasts, but in this case, all technology-related, old computers, old video game systems, that sort of thing. Again, if you're caught up with the CoCo Crew Podcast, then we recommend that you check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you have a need to host audio on the internet, whether it's for your own podcast or your church services or your business or whatever you got, then we recommend that you check out CyberEars, where you will get your audio on your terms. If you'd like to reach out and contact the host of the CoCo Crew Podcast via email, we have some addresses set up just for that. First three will reach all of the hosts of the CoCo Crew Podcast. Show, SHOW, at CoCoCrew.org. That's CoCoCrew.org. We also have podcast, PODCAST, at CoCoCrew.org. And feedback, FEEDBACK, at CoCoCrew.org. Should you prefer to contact just one of the hosts individually, then we also have those set up. So I'm available as John, JOHN, at CoCoCrew.org. Neil is available as Neil, NEIL, at CoCoCrew.org. Mike, of course, is Mike, MIKE, at CoCoCrew.org. And Boise is, listen to the spelling, BOISY, at CoCoCrew.org. Feel free to reach out and touch one of us, so to speak. Those are our standard announcements. Here's where we normally would like to have, we do have a few announcements for events in real life. Some of them may still be more speculative or hopeful. Who knows? But VCF Midwest was scheduled to be in September, but that has now been canceled. So that is a sad event. Moving on, Tandy Assembly is still scheduled for the weekend of October 30th through November 1st of 2020. Again, their surveys have been sent out to make sure that there's still enough people interested in coming to make that worthwhile. And, of course, it will be subject to whatever legal restrictions the government of Ohio or local people or whoever manage to impose on us. But for now, we're still hoping to have the event. So respond to your surveys and make it look like it's going to be worthwhile. That will be, again, October 30th through November 1st of 2020. And with all hope not quite giving up, but maybe looking to the future, we have on the books CoCo Fest 2021, scheduled for April 24th through the 25th of 2021. Hopefully we'll get through it to there, and COVID will no longer be a big issue. At the way things have been going, who knows? But anyway, there's our announcements. So why don't we take another break, and then we'll be back with some news.
Gimme Soft presents Max Sound. Gimme Soft presents Max Sound.
Gimme Soft presents Max Sound.
Max Sound presents Gimme Soft. Max Sound is a hardware-software, high-quality audio recording station designed for the new Color Computer 3 by Lucas Industries 2000.
Max Sound allows you to store real music and voices in the Color Computer 3.
Max Sound will provide hours of fun for the whole family. From Helsinki to Christchurch, Max Sound, the quality recording studio of the 80s. From GimmeSoft.
New from ENG Systems Laboratories, the keyboard beeper cartridge. It plugs right into your color computer's expansion port, but still allows you to connect any other device using the inline transparent expansion port. The cartridge has an onboard speaker. Hear a beep as any key is pressed, significantly reducing typing errors. LED power indicators monitor the 5-volt, plus 12-volt, and minus 12-volt power supplies. Flip a switch to enable or disable a cartridge detect line. Power up into basic or a game pack. Best of all, it has an easily accessible reset switch right on the cartridge pack. No more feeling around blindly behind the computer trying to find the reset switch. All of these features and no modifications to your color computer are required. The keyboard beeper cartridge is just $59.95 plus postage and handling. Another great product from ENG Systems Laboratories, Springfield, Virginia.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back. Now it's time for the news. The first item I've got on the list here comes from Art Flexer, longtime member of the community, ADOS guy. Posted some of this. It's actually an email posting from back in May we've kind of been holding on to. References back to an interview that Tim Lindner did with Marty Goodman. Anyway, it talks about what he calls the shift break reset technique. And so what it amounts to is that once you follow through the description or whatever, if you hold down shift and break while you do a reset, basically the CoCo ROM will essentially break out to user control without having cleared all the memory. And so if you're trying to, say, reverse engineer something with a complex loader or whatever, something that puts code into memory in a few places as it's loading, that sort of thing, it can simplify that process of figuring out where that code goes and how it's running or whatever. I don't know. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, I probably can't explain it much better without you being able to take a look yourself. But it's an interesting prospect, and if you're looking to break some games or copy protection on games or that sort of thing, it's a neat capability that might come in handy. And it's just an interesting write-up. It was worth talking about. We probably would have covered this one in an earlier episode, but we kind of were reaching out about possibly having an interview, and we still may, but let's just say it hasn't happened yet. Anyway, it's cool to hear that there are some kind of hidden, it's not quite an Easter egg, I guess, but some hidden things that you can do to be able to catch the CoCo with its pants down, shall we say, when you're trying to break, say, a copy protection scheme or other kind of complex loading kind of stuff. Pretty neat. So moving on, we got an MC10 video posted to YouTube from Ingmar Mainz. Not familiar with Ingmar. Basically, he's showing you how to load a program on the MC10, and the program happens to be a demo of CW, which is an acronym for continuous wave, but it actually refers to Morse code. It's a term that ham radio operators use for Morse code, is CW. It's I'm not sure how super informative it is for anyone who's already a fan of the CoCo or the MC10. But it's just good to know that somebody else is out there and posting some videos, and maybe it's someone to keep an eye on. Very cool. Thank you, Ingmar. Hope to see more from you. All right. So first part of the news always has a few random things in it. And so here's one gaming related. Sega prepares console comeback, and they're about to get wrecked. From a Max Mueller maybe, at CCN. This is, not exactly CoCo stuff, but kind of relates to somebody who used to be big in old video games, and kind of talking about bringing stuff back in reference to, the competition includes some of these retro-inspired consoles, like the modern-day Atari 2600 thing that we keep hearing might come back. But I assume this is actually a more modern style console they're thinking of. But it seems like Sega should be able to carve out a place back in the video gaming market. I don't know, maybe not, but I can see why they would want to. There used to be a big day back in the Sonic the Hedgehog Sega kind of days. So What do you think, Neil? You're a gaming expert. Does Sega got a chance in Modern World?
I hope they do. You know, I like Sega, and I mean, basically after the Sega Genesis, they kind of had, they were kind of struggling, with the last two consoles they released. So hopefully this one does well for them.
Yeah.
I was shocked to see this article, so that's pretty cool.
Well, I know the Dreamcast held on, in some ways longer than it should have. Even after it was canceled, there were still some releases of games for it. Maybe there'll be some fans still hanging out waiting for it, or probably there'll be, people that'll just judge it on its own merits, whatever those might be. But I don't know. It's always cool to hear an old player coming back. It's kind of like betting on Mike Tyson in the boxing match, Watch your ears. All right. Well, enough of that. Let's see. Moving on. So this is from Robin Harris, who is this. I think we had one of Robin's articles last month. Robin is building some sort of homebrew 6502-based system. But the neat thing about the 6502 hardware is, the bus interfacing is pretty similar to what you want to use for the 6809. A lot of what he's writing for the 6502 related stuff applies at a hardware level if you want to connect to a 6809. So, with that said, he's got an article here on the LCD module 4-bit mode with the 6522 VIA. I think the 6522 was last month's article that we referenced. So, anyway, if you've ever seen these LCD modules with a couple of lines that are sold with a lot of Arduino and those kind of style kits, they're not too hard to interface to. A lot of people interested in doing so and whatever, and maybe it's something you'd like to hook up to your CoCo, and this explains kind of how the hardware works.
The next news item is follow-up on my Vectrix joystick repair by David Galloway. This is a Facebook post that I can't see, but I'm assuming that someone has rebuilt a Vectrix joystick or actually repaired an existing one, which I would presume is good because those things have to be hard to find, right, John?
Yeah. Well, the Vectrix joysticks, especially the full plastic and original stuff, is fairly, not super hard to find, but you got to get your checkbook out. Exactly. They go pretty expensive. But what's interesting about them in my book is that they're very similar to the way the CoCo joysticks work. They're wired up a little bit differently, but very similar. Those who, this is on the Vectrix Fans Unite Facebook group. And if you join up there, you should be able to see the post. And it's the person is taking a Tandy, non-deluxe, or what I've always called the Black Beauty. He's taking the Black Beauty style of joystick and used that basically as a parts machine or parts scowl for doing some repairs on his Vectrix joystick. So basically taking the gimbal out or parts of it and been able to do the repair. But anyway, the point being that they, despite a few wiring differences, they're actually handled pretty similar between the Vectrix and the CoCo. And I think that's interesting.
All right, the next item is setting up an MC10 with an MCX128 and MC to load software by Steve Strobridge. This is a YouTube video, and from what I can see, Steve is it's about a 12-minute video. He's going through setting up an MC10 with an MCX128, which I believe is a memory expansion board for that computer, and goes through and talks about it. Looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, the MCX128 not only does it expand the memory, it also includes ROMs that expand the basic capabilities, the basic language for the MC10. Been a popular upgrade with a lot of people. I think Jim Gary has used it a lot in his various ponderous collection of of MC10 work. If you're interested in the MC10 and can get an MCX128, it's probably a worthwhile upgrade. And Steve here is showing you how to use it, along with it includes the access to this MC server, which is kind of like, it's essentially DriveWire kind of repackaged, but for the MC10 specifically.
Yeah, it's good to see. All right, the next news item is, here is the Timberman source code minus the resource files by Mr. Paul Thayer, and it looks like he has posted, I guess, the source code to his game, which is very generous. Very nice, Paul. Good way to share your work.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Well, it's always good to see people sharing their work. you always hope that somebody will pick it up and do something with it or learn something from it or document it or whatever. It's easy for a source release to basically amount to a code dump where you just kind of throw it out there and it's there, but then if nothing ever happens with it, kind of as if a tree falls in the forest sort of situation. But hopefully somebody will take a look and find something useful. I think he said he's Timberland source code and Timberman source code minus the resource files, which probably means some of the graphics or whatever. So maybe you could do a version with your own, choppers or whatever, your own characters for doing the chopping, or maybe your own axe replacements or whatever. Depends on how much you're into it, what you can make of it.
Good work. The next news item is I just couldn't stop with the cast to basic script I coded yesterday by Julian Brown. This appears to be in the Dragon 3264 Owners Users Group on Facebook. I can't see the post. John, can you talk about it?
So he's working on a CAS to basic script. Don't know the specifics of that. It says he added extended Dragon DOS token. So basically, I guess he's in the Dragon world using a CAS file that he wants to turn back into a text file representing the basic code. Added it so that along with the non-DOS tokens, he's added the DOS tokens as well for Dragon DOS. Then he checked CoCo compatibility, and so now he's done the CoCo specific tokens and the RS-DOS tokens. Anyway, he's got a link on Bitbucket for people who want the source, I guess. So, I don't know, it's kind of a typical story if somebody starts working on a project and figure out, well, if I do this one more thing, that'd be cool. If I do this one more thing, that'd be cool. And anyway, that's where he ended up. And he released something on Bitbucket for those who might want to, who might want to use the tool or do something similar. I've often thought that someone should go through the toolshed code, and there's tools there for doing this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And add probably MC10 and or Dragon tokenization and detokenization for the KEKB tools or whatever, and add the Dragon file systems for the DECB tool or a whole new tool, call it DDoS or something. But anyway, maybe Julian is a listener and can pick up on that idea. That'd be cool. The next link I've got is not a computer thing at all, really, but I found it helpful. This is just a little music lesson on different types of clefs, and particularly the treble clef and the bass clef, and how they relate to one another, and where middle C is on the two different kinds of clefs, and that sort of thing. And then introduces the notion of the grand staff, which kind of puts the two clefs together. I don't know, if it may sound like I'm speaking Spanish or something, that if you're not into music at all, I found it an interesting little article, and had always kind of wondered, when you transition between the two clefs, exactly how much difference there were in the different notes at the bottom versus at the top or whatever. And it helps to answer that particular question on this post. So, I don't know, check it out. Maybe you'll find yourself going down a musical rat hole. Maybe you won't. But I hope you'll enjoy it and check it out. And if you want to produce some CoCo programs with access to some decent music, and you want to do it on cartridge, I've got a good technology that I could make available for you. So please consider that as well. All right. The next one is from Timothy Lee at Ars Technica. It says, lawsuit over online book lending could bankrupt Internet Archive. Probably you've heard of us talk about the Internet Archive, uploading PDFs and that sort of thing to the archive. It's a great resource, particularly for retro computing people, partly because one of their technology evangelists or whatever is a retro computing person that has uploaded a lot of things. Anyway, they apparently have run afoul of some book publishers or whatever with some of their practices, and it's led to a lawsuit. It's probably not surprising, really. Maybe you come down on one side, maybe on the other, but it might be worth checking out, reading up, and learning more about exact issues at hand relating to copyright and the ability to share content over the internet, in the modern age, that sort of thing. I don't know. It's kind of in the worth a good read kind of category. So
yeah, this is really disappointing because there's a lot of good stuff on there, and I would hope they don't go down.
Yeah. Definitely want to keep them around one way or another. It may have been a lofty dream in some ways, but I hope it manages to stay on its foot one way or another. Okay. Got a post from Rich Whitehouse, and this appears to be associated with something called the Video Game History Foundation. I don't know if he's, just a random contributor or if he's actually employed there or whatever. The title, Reconstructing a Lost NES, that's Nintendo Entertainment System, a lost NES game from 30-year-old source code disc. So I think this is going to sound something that reads a little like Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Digital Age. Basically, they've collected some old diskettes and figured out how to read them and put things back together and rebuild it and reproduce this on this basically lost game for the NES. Could be a good read. If you don't know, it might be a little tough to get through if you don't already have some understanding of how the NES works, from a technology standpoint. But if you do, or if you at least want to enjoy some of the other stuff they talk about on, reading stuff off our old floppy disk and that sort of thing, then give it a shot. I think you might enjoy it. You check it out, Neil?
No, I haven't checked it out, actually. This is new for me. I will, though. I like the NES, as you know.
Oh, yeah. And the next one, this comes from Sean Nichols at The Register. So, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I think, but if you bought a CRT monitor or TV 13-plus years ago, probably about the last time you could buy one, at least off the shelf, just hold on a little longer. There may be a small check for you. And so apparently there's a class action lawsuit pending in California related to the sales of these old CRT televisions and monitors from a long time ago, between 1995 and 2007. If it's like most class action lawsuits, even if they win, your check will probably be $13 and a buy a Big Mac, get a Big Mac free coupon at the local McDonald's or something like that. Just kind of comical technology that most of our listeners should be at least somewhat familiar with, but just kind of an illustration of your justice system at work here, or your legal system at work. How long it takes to resolve some of these things and how ridiculous some things can be.
You're coming in loud and clear. Must be a realistic CB radio.
10-4, good buddy. It's my new 40-channel Realistic. Radio Shack's got it on sale right now for only $79. I saved $60.
That Realistic sure is a good brand.
10-4 on that. You can depend on Realistic.
Where are you headed now?
Back to Radio Shack. The new 4K TRS-80 color computer is on sale for just $349.
10-4, good buddy. Color graphics, sound, joysticks. Talk to you later.
Whoa, where you going?
Radio Shack, of course.
The Realistic 40-channel CB radio and TRS-80 color computer on sale now. Only at Radio Shack, a Tandy company.
Do you draw on a CoCo? Then you need Chroma Sketch, the picture program writer. Chroma Sketch is a graphics package that can actually write a basic program as you draw, paint, and letter on the high-res screen. Simply enable the program writer option and save the program to tape or disk to recreate your picture from basic at any time, or save the screen as a binary image. Draw complex shapes and patterns. Save these definitions to tape or disk for use in your own basic programs. Chroma Sketch's dual cursors simplify creating arcs, circles, lines, and boxes. Enhance your drawing experience with options like full-screen crosshair cursor or graph paper grid. Draw complex objects and Chroma Sketch will redraw, rotate, reduce, or enlarge them at any position, in any color or pattern. Paint in any dot pattern, including checks, stripes, or others that you define yourself. Draw dotted or twisted lines. Overlay color patterns for translucent effects. And the fast, compact graphic programs that Chroma Sketch generates are yours to use in any way you wish without license. These basic programs can be used for games, graphic adventures, educational software, or on-screen slideshows. Chroma Sketch can utilize any combination of joystick-compatible devices, including the touchpad or color mouse. Best of all, Chroma Sketch is just $29.95 on cassette and $34.95 on disc, plus free shipping and handling. Chroma Sketch requires 32K extended basic and works with all ROM versions. Chroma Sketch, the picture program writer, from Nexus, Knoxville, Tennessee.
This one is from Ed Snyder. I have a feeling this is going to keep getting better. Ed, apparently, if you're familiar with working on the Gimme X graphics enhancement for the color computer, figured out a way to add an 8 megabyte module to the Gimme X. So it would extend the CoCo memory by 8 meg, and that should last you multiple lifetimes.
Yeah, well,
a lot of memory.
And you'll have greater, buy a whole new machine and you'll have a lot of cool stuff to do with it.
Yeah. You can go check that link out and keep posted on Ed's developments of Gimme X. This next one is from Erico Patricio Monterio, a TRS-80 color computer Dragon commercial quality action fight game. This one's kind of cool. It's not really a blog, but it's kind of listed that way. But he's looking at developing a CoCo game based on the action fight games that were really popular. It's kind of neat. It shows kind of the development of figuring out to use semi-graphics on the CoCo, using an emulator because there's never real CoCo. The video in there is at least as animated of the development and kind of the end result. And he's doing it in BASIC, so trying different things to see how to make it faster. Yeah, it's kind of cool, the fight characters he's got moving around and things. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. Pretty cool.
Yeah, this was surprisingly good for the technology.
Okay, next one is from James Jones. Recently, I was surprised to discover that in BASIC 09, you can assign things other than atomic types. So this article is just talking about some of the things you can do in BASIC 09. If you're not familiar with BASIC 09, it has some very flexible variable declarations and structures, and you can get really complicated with it. So in this article, James is talking about creating multiple arrays and copying them to each other, and definitely worth reading and checking out. Another good one from James Jones.
Yeah, that's cool. I was always count on James for some petty language analysis stuff. Pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our next one is from David Yude. It's the Bites brothers, Brent and Barry, solve their neighborhood mysteries. This is a Facebook group, and it says, "Move over, Frank and Joe Hardy, the Hardy Boys. The Bites brothers, Brent and Barry, solve their neighborhood mysteries using cutting-edge 8-bit technology." So these are those books that John was alluding to at the beginning of the show, and looks like there's several of these books published in the early 80s. Pretty cool. And these included programs, correct, John?
That's right. You can type in stuff from them, work on problems, that sort of stuff. Yeah, I don't know if they're available as a PDF or not, but looks like they might be available on the Internet Archive.
All right, our next news article is from Sierra Anscombe. XROR Windows packaging, good, bad? So it looks like here he's putting together a package for Windows, a Windows build here.
Well, yeah, so he's a producer of XROR and just asking for feedback on the packaging of it. Thought it was worth discussing.
All right, the next news article is also from Sierra Anscombe. XROR 0.36 released, a new version.
I'm not sure how much difference in time there was between how's my packaging and I just released one. But, nothing else. He'll still continue packaging releases in the future, so he'll still appreciate whatever feedback you have.
Yeah, it's a good emulator, too.
XROR is a good emulator for the CoCo 1 and 2 and the Dragon.
All right, next news article is from Todd Wallace. A working chiptunes player for OS 9. This looks pretty cool. Right now, it only supports, on the right up here, is the OPL sound chip, but it looks like he has plans for the GMC.
Yeah, we'll see how that works out. Yeah, I think right now he's only targeting the Mega Mini, whatever, MPI.
Yeah, there was the other sound card, too, wasn't there? Ed Snyder had the, just the regular.
Yeah, he had... I forget what that was called now.
Yeah, I forget too.
CoCo PSG.
That's it. Yeah, it probably works with that. I would assume. I mean.
Well, that'd be a whole different type of file, but I don't know if he's got them or not. But
that's a cool video, cool walkthrough of the player.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's done a good work on the software for the player.
And cool to see it in OS 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what got me is the OS 9 support.
Because that's why you run OS 9, it's for multimedia.
Yeah.
You do some multitasking.
Well, I guess.
The next news article is from Ed Snyder, speaking of Ed. MC10 8K internal mod.
He goes on to explain in there that, the MC10 is one of its flaws, shall we say, is the way they've wired up the video chip. It can't actually access the higher res modes because they access more memory than is actually wired to the chip. There's a few ways around this, but a couple of ways at least, but there are really variations on the theme of hooking up those extra memory address lines one way or another. Apparently, Steve Strobridge asked him to do a well-known mod. Sure, I've totally followed, but for whatever reason, he decided to do his own version of the mod. I'm not sure how much it differs from the original version. Probably just want to show you the motherboard porn with the nicely soldered wires.
Yeah.
So, pretty cool.
Now, this mod, does it interfere with the 16K expansion module?
Like the MCX 120 or the regular 16K?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I would bet they conflict, but I'm not 100% sure.
All right, our next news article, speaking of the MC10, is from Jim Gary. He is working on porting Fargoal from VIC to MC10. I'm assuming is that VIC 20?
Yeah, I think so.
It says VIC. It's a game here he's porting over. Yeah, it looks pretty neat.
2 links there, I think. One is...
Yeah, I see that. He was having some problems on the first one here.
Well, it goes to the MC10 Facebook group. You guys really need to join more Facebook groups.
Never.
Yeah, I do. I got to get on that MC10 group.
And then the other one's a YouTube link.
Another game for the MC10.
Yep.
There's a lot of support for it. The next news article is from Richard Lorbieski. His company is branding as Boysen Tech. Boysen Tech is proud to announce to be another source for the CoCo SDC. So now you can get them through Richard and not just Ed Snyder. Richard
tends to favor other media sources for his advertisements, so we don't have the whole story on that. But Richard, if you'd like to come on and talk about your products, let us know. Occasionally there'd be some supply issues with the ones from Ed Snyder. They didn't seem to last long in terms of not being available, but there were a few times here and there. So I'm not really sure if that was the motivation or if there's something else. I mean, it looks like essentially the same design, just produced in a black solder mask. So I don't know if there's any advantage to buying a Boysen Tech card versus a Ed Snyder card. They both do support their stuff or whatever, so your mileage may vary, but I think they should probably just go with whoever's got one available when you need it.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, is availability.
Right.
Well,
I don't know how the supply, or the demand, I should say. I don't know if the demand is still strong for them or not.
Yeah, you'd think it'd be getting saturated at this point, but who knows?
It's
you would think so, but I mean,
spares.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would have more than one machine and maybe think that it's worthwhile to have more than one STC.
All right, this next news article is from myself, Neil Blanche. It's kind of cool to do my own here. I'm producing 2 games, actually, on ROM cartridge. The first game is 3D Monster Maze. It's a brand new game for your CoCo from Evan Wright. Evan has done a few games now for the CoCo. He's done Hunt the Wumpus, which is also still available, and Flooded. So that was his first game. So now he's on to his third game, 3D Monster Maze. So it is ready and available. If you're interested, you can reach me at on the show here, Neil at CoCoCrew.org. And the next game I'm producing is it's a reprint for Rick Adams. It's his game Bomb Threat, and it's on a yellow cartridge. And it comes complete in the both games come complete in the box, the TRS-80 box, just like back in the day from Radio Shack. So yep, both those games are available. If you're interested, reach out to me.
Yeah, I was going to comment on your cartridge colors. They're looking bright.
Yeah, just trying to do something a little fun, keep them a little different. Speaking of that, 3D Monster Maze comes on 2 different colors. So you can get a translucent see-through kind of plastic or a deep blue. They both seem to work nice with the labels. So I like to keep the cartridges going.
Good work.
All right, next news article is from Sierra and Ascom. This game, I remember we talked about this before. It's Dungeons and Dragons. Wait, there's more. It looks like he's got it's an anniversary edition. It's a new version, re-release. First one was like 2017. It looks like here.
He's done a new version, I think, some fixes here and there. The biggest thing, if you read down, that's he's got a ROM image available that you can put into a Game Master cartridge, and it will use the audio hardware there to produce a soundtrack. So pretty cool.
Yeah, that is.
Look at the pictures there. When it's delight for the eyes, shall we say? Right. And it's a pretty well done game. It's kind of neat. It's like 4 players are on the same screen simultaneously. It's a neat way to play.
The other thing to mention too is he's released this on cassette tape. That's awesome.
Yeah, he did originally release on cassette.
Yeah. Original artwork in there and the tapes. It's very professional looking.
All right, the next news item is the best easy way to capture analog video. It's a little weird by Technology Connections at YouTube. This is a YouTube video capturing video with a USB 3.0 HD capture device.
Well, that's what he does. He goes through and shows, kind of traditional composite video captures or whatever from VHS, and he basically says, well, I remember VHS wasn't that great, but it really sucked this bad, or something to that effect.
Yeah, so he's using like a composite audio video to digital converter or something.
Yeah, so he's converting to HDMI and then back from HDMI. We're doing the capture on HDMI, and something about that combination of encodings and decodings and whatever suits his eyes a little better, I guess is what it comes down to. You get it looks like the videos come out a little bit crisper, the colors come out a little bit more bright or whatever. Kind of like washing clothes with Gain instead of the bargain detergent. Anyway, I don't know how much credence to give it, but this guy does. I mean, he has a lot of videos about making videos. You know what I mean? It seems like whatever the video version of an audio file is, it seems like that kind of a guy. Mm-hmm. And so if he says that this helps get better captures from VHS or other analog sources, then maybe it's worth looking at. Maybe it'll help out.
Yeah, so I've done this before. You've got old VHS tapes that you want to, digitize so you don't have to carry it on the VHS anymore. I'll have to look at this. This looks like an interesting video and probably would be applicable to doing stuff with the CoCo 3 as well.
Yeah.
All right, the next news item is designing 3D printed enclosures for, is that KiCad PCBs?
Yeah.
By Tom Nardi at Hackaday. I'm not sure what KiCad is, but it looks like he's doing some type of a 3D printed enclosure.
Well, KiCad is it's an open source, literally a PCB design tool chain, whatever. And it's got schematic capture that then feeds into PCB layout. And then in the PCB layout tool, there's a, kind of a viewing option where you can visualize your card, not only, the actual, this is what the layouts will look like, but you can actually visualize it with the components in place.
Mm-hmm. There's
a 3D aspect to it. You can then, turn it around, look at it from the back, all that kind of stuff. He's taking that output and then feeding it in to this other tool that helps you design plastic boxes to 3D print around it.
Right. So you could kind of get an idea for how the different components are going to stick out and obstruct or whatever.
Right. Which I'm sure our 3D printing people in the audience or in the community, like John Strong, for example, can probably tell you all about how it looks like the PCB is going to fit, but when you try to put the lid on the case, sometimes the capacitors stick up too high, that sort of thing.
Yep. Makes sense. A good way to prototype that out.
You and me, we've been together for a long time. And when you're working so hard, things can get a little hot. And you've got to find a way to cool it down. Cool down your color computer with the CoCo Cooler from REM Industries. It brings down the operating temperature to ambient, regardless of accessory load. Reduces temperature of the entire computer, not just the SAM chip. Easy 1-minute installation, and it's just $39.95. And now offering the CoCo Cooler 2. It's the same price and the same fit for the Color Computer 2. Don't let your color computer get too hot. Cool it down with the CoCo Cooler.
For fastest service, send money order or certified check. Add $2 shipping for continental U.S. Add $4 shipping for Alaska, Hawaii, Canada, and APOs. Add $15 shipping for overseas. Add $3 for 220 to 250 volt model. California residents add 6.5% sales tax. Will ship COD on USA shipments only. All merchandise shipped from stock. CoCo Cooler is a product of REM Industries Incorporated, Chatsworth, California.
If you are a fan of the TRS-80 color computer, then you won't want to miss CoCo, the colorful history of Tandy's underdog computer from CRC Press. Follow the evolution of the color computer from the early beginnings of Project Green Thumb and Videotex terminals to the CoCo 1, MC10, CoCo 2, and CoCo 3. Follow the rise of Rainbow Magazine, Microware, and the CoCo community at large. Get the inside story from Tandy engineers, constantly challenged to reduce cost and increase capability. If you own a CoCo, you should own this book, CoCo, the colorful history of Tandy's underdog computer, written by Boise Pete and Bill LaJudas. Available now at Amazon.com.
All right, the next news item is Reversi and Super Basic on the color computer by Jerry Stratton. So it looks like Jerry has a blog post with a lot of detail about how he wrote this game. Quite interesting. I'm just perusing through it. Looks good. Seems to have some pedagogical value, if you will. So,
yeah. Well, I thought Mike might have some comments on the Super Basic aspect. Did you get the book that he wrote, Mike?
Yes, I've got the book, and yeah, I thought that was pretty cool that he's continuing with it and doing other things in Super Basic. So, yeah, pretty cool. And he goes on to talk about how it's kind of generic, where it's not dependent on specific computers, just using text characters. So, made it real easily adapted.
These old BASIC books, those kind of generic programs in BASIC that you could get back in the 80s. They can be useful fodder for any kind of compiler style of project. Just, I want to test out, I've got a tool that works with basic source code. I want to make sure it works on all of it or as much as possible. It's kind of cool to take old computer game books and whatever and run some stuff through them. And yeah, a lot of it's just plain text or whatever, but it definitely runs through all the, how the for loops work and how the if statements work and all those sort of things. So that's kind of cool.
The next item, in fact, is related to this. Convert PC Basic code to TRS-80 Extended Color Basic. Again, Jerry is talking about how to take original code written in PC Basic and bring it over to do a CoCo translation by hand. So another good aspect of this article. Very good work. Yeah. All right, the next news item is Rally SG is based on the arcade game Rally X from Namco by Nick Marentes. This looks like a new game that Nick wrote for the CoCo 3. This is the first time I'm seeing this.
Been out a week or two, not a super long time. It's a semi-graphics, he says 64 by 64 resolution. This SG8 is what he's using. It's a semi-graphics game. I mean, it's essentially a low-res graphics game. But it's Rally X, and if you're familiar with Rally X, or it's a clone or whatever Rally X, it's almost like a marble maze kind of you're racing around in, and so you don't need a lot of super high res stuff. I mean, it's not like you're not gonna look into the driver's eyes. You know what I mean? You're gonna see a block for the car.
Right.
I haven't played it. It looks okay. If you like Rally X, you'll probably like this game. It certainly makes sense if you're gonna. Basically scrolling the entire screen in 4 different directions. If you're going to scroll the whole screen, or at least in the non-score version of the screen, part of the screen, you want to limit it to the amount of data you have to move, and so using the semi-graphics format for that makes a lot of sense. Very cool. There is a video available at the link if you want to watch it. Won't do much good on the podcast, but you can go and check it out. I think he's asking $5 or something for it.
Yeah, $5. Yeah.
Yeah, very.
And it runs on the 1, 2, and 3, which is kind of nice. And
yeah, that is nice.
Nick, it's not too late. This should be released on a cartridge.
Yeah, we can certainly get it on a cartridge. It wouldn't be a big deal. As long as you haven't painted yourself into a corner in any specific way, which most of you probably haven't, but just a caveat, just in case. But yeah, we'd love to get it on a cartridge if you'd be interested. And if you want one that plays music, we could get you on one of those cartridges. Of course, we'd have to get some musical content, but I'll bet we could figure that out too.
This one is from Luciano Scharf. Another CP400 recovered, working perfectly after general cleaning. This is a pretty cool one. This is the Brazilian company Prologica, the CP400, which is a clone of the color computer. This link, it's got a big picture library that's worth looking at. I've got a soft spot for the CP400. It just always look kind of cool, as well as the CP450, which is the disk drive. So he just goes through getting a grubby, non-functioning CP450. He tore the whole thing down, took all the boards off of the disk drive, and he had to replace the floppy disk controller chip. That's really was the main thing that was wrong with it. Cleaned it up, put it all back together, and works great. He's got some video of that. Definitely cool to see. These don't come up very often on eBay, in my searches anyway.
Yeah, very rare.
Yeah, so
worth the
pretty
effort.
cool. This next one is from Robin Harris, adding a serial interface, the MC6850. So this is pretty cool. This is an article talking about how most people would go with the 6551 because it was easier to work with, but he was unable to get those at a good price, so he had the more basic MC6850, which goes through building a serial interface circuit with the 6850, which takes a little more muscle and work, but the results are good.
Now, this is the same guy that I had a link for in my section about that's making a 6502 based board, homebrew board. Yeah, the 6850 works fine for serial stuff, but it's a little more complicated or a little less flexible a chip, but basically what it amounts to. And so you need to work a little bit harder on the clocking for the bit speed the selection. Also of note, the 6850 is a chip that's in use in the MIDI interfaces that are in the community for the CoCo. If you want to know how those are working, this will explain at least how the chip itself is working in those. So, very cool.
This article is from Swastik Braunwald. Is C still a higher level language? This is kind of a discussion board and pretty entertaining. So, I guess it depends. Like the general gist is, well, it depends on your perspective. If you're using assembler, C is a really high level language. If you're using Swift, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah, they got to that point pretty quick in the discussion. It was almost disappointing how quickly they got to that reasonable truce. But yeah, if this was a programming podcast, we might want to save this for our own discussion.
Yeah.
But it's at least somewhat related since we have C for for OS 9 and whatever. But yeah, I remember definitely when I was in the fifth grade or something, C was a high level language. It was a big time. It's like when I learned D or Pascal, and then can control the world. But it's funny now, 30 years later, or however many years later it is, and more than that, this is a question it's not unreasonable to ask, and it's not even just the snot-nosed kids coming straight out of college asking it, but there's actually people who actually have some experience under the belts asking this sort of stuff. So you can't just slap them and tell Junior to sit down. But anyway, it might be an interesting discussion to read or participate in for some members of the audience. So there you go. And if nothing else, it's a marker for where we are in the development of computers and technology overall.
I agree. A lot of great discussion could come out of talking about that.
All right, our final article is from Josh Dersch, or Dersk, I'm not sure which it is, but he's from it's about the closing of the Living Computer Museums and Labs in Seattle. This is definitely worth a read. Josh was an engineer working there. He was one of the people maintaining and restoring a lot of these old computer systems. As you know, it was closed down due to COVID in the spring. That pretty much was the death knell for it. They weren't able to reopen.
So they've let their employees go, and Josh was talking about his last time shutting down the computers, leaving it for good. The basic people that own the museum have said it's shut down, but they haven't said it's shut down permanently. So it's kind of a question mark there on what will happen in the future. But definitely a good read about the Living Computer Museum and Labs.
Yeah, that's sad. Certainly hope that it might come back someday. Hard to tell at this point. It's gone long enough. People have been laid off, sent home, gotten other jobs or whatever. Maybe, it's just sort of a shame. I'm sure for this guy, it must have been a dream job, and his dream job is gone. And, some people say, well, boo-hoo, we don't all get to work our dream jobs. And that's kind of valid, if a little petty, but
A little cool. Yeah.
But it's the place I would have liked to have visited. Not going to get that chance now. So it's I hope there's still room in the world for this kind of stuff going forward. We're always in that kind of, how long is our hobby going to actually live? It's kind of indeterminate. This could be something that, there could be people playing with these machines when the machines are 80 years old. Or it could be that in 15 years we're all bored or dead and nobody touches our stuff except to carry it to the landfill. There's probably something in between those two, but it's hard to tell exactly where it lands. How's that for excitement, huh? All right.
Talk about ending on a great note, huh?
Full of happy times. Like
I don't know why people say I'm too negative sometimes. Oh, Lord. Well, why don't we... that constitutes the end of our listings for news. So why don't we take a little break, and we'll be back with a little feedback.
New from Bumblebee Software, it's ColorSpeak, the easy-to-use color computer voice synthesizer.
Greetings, everybody. I am a speech synthesizer.
The ColorSpeak voice synthesis cartridge works with all color computers, 4K through 64K, and all versions of BASIC. That's because ColorSpeak has its own internal 2K of RAM, and all of the software required is stored on its own onboard ROM. Just plug it into your color computer, power up, and begin using ColorSpeak. ColorSpeak features text-to-speech mode,
text-to-speech,
phoneme mode, inflection mode, and spelling mode. From BASIC, simply assign a string of text to the talk $ variable and call the USR routine to speak it.
How are you?
ColorSpeak includes user manual, phoneme dictionary, cartridge pack, and demo tape. Just $169 from Bumblebee Software.
Unlock the real power of your CoCo with great deals from Danasoft. Like Big Basic, it allows you to create programs up to 470K, just $39.95 US, $46.50 Canadian. Or Big RAM Disk. Get the speed of working with programs and data in memory. You can format, copy, backup, just like a real disk drive. Just $12.95 US, $14.95 Canadian. See our ad in Rainbow Magazine. When you think CoCo, think great deals from Danasoft. We're located in sunny Mississauga.
CoCo Cruisers, welcome back. We've got a little bit of a different feedback segment today. We've got one item from a listener that may turn into a bit of a discussion item. I think we're going to launch a little bit of a new feature here as well. So, all right, well, starting out, we have a feedback item from Robert Murphy. It's become one of our most prolific feedback fans. We always love to hear from you, Robert. So he says there really should be a PayPal donation and or Patreon link to let folks give back for the show. And so implying that we could collect some donations or whatever. Here's my statement on that, is that the show doesn't really cost us. It costs us time, but not really money, except to the extent that time is money, right? I think really if you're going to try to compensate us with money for our time, we're not going to collect anywhere near the amount of money we need for that.
No.
And so it's really our little gift to the community, and it's not that much money, and it does help that Cyber Ears sponsors the show, so we don't have to pay for any kind of hosting, so that's good stuff. That helps a lot. Otherwise, I don't really know what we would do with any money that you would give us for the show. We all could go out and buy, expensive microphones or expensive speaker setups, or I don't know, audio switchers or green screens or something like that. Green screen won't do much good for our audio podcast, but that kind of stuff. And I guess there might be some other shows that have done that sort of thing, but I don't think it suits the personalities. I don't think it suits the personality of our show or of our host very much. To be honest, if any of these guys come and say, "Hey, I need to buy a bigger microphone," I'll say, "What's the matter? Your paycheck didn't come in?" So I don't know. I mean, some people collect the sort of equipment and whatever, take pride in it, and I kind of take pride in the fact that I'm using my laptop microphone, and it seems to work okay. So if you don't think my laptop microphone is good enough, well, that might be a good feedback item to send. Not you, Robert, specifically, but anybody else listening. If you think we need some better equipment for quality or whatever reasons, that'd be a good feedback item to submit. But in terms of having a way to donate money or whatever, I'm just not sure how we would use it. I don't think we're hurting for money for anything we want to do with the show. Any of you guys disagree?
No, it's a nice thought, but yeah, right. We're self-sufficient and we're here because we love the CoCo.
That's it.
Exactly.
I think that's sort of how I would say it. It's very nice to think about that, but this is our way of giving back. So.
All right, as for our new feature, we thought we would try to, maybe inspire a little extra feedback and give a little guidance for people who might be too shy to come up with their own topics, or maybe it's a gateway and you answer what we're going to call our question of the month, and then also follow on with that out of the way. I also wanted to say this and talk about, what a great voice John has or something like that. So we're going to call this the listener question of the month. And so this month we are offering this question. So listeners, the question of the month is, when do you prefer to use an emulator instead of real hardware? When do you prefer to use an emulator instead of real hardware? So we're not asking, do you prefer XROAR or MAME or VCC or whatever. We're just saying, when would you rather pop up with an actual emulator? Now, it might be that you want to use a feature for a certain thing that only one emulator has, and that's worth mentioning if that's your situation. But just to inspire some feedback, when do you prefer to use an emulator? Go ahead and hit us back. That's feedback, FEEDBACK at CoCo Crew, CoCocrew.org. Let us know, when do you prefer to use an emulator rather than real hardware in the CoCo world? All right. Well, that's our feedback for this month. So why don't we take a little break, and we'll be back with some sort of host discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest in the studio with us today, the world-famous Blaise Pascal. Mr. Pascal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Tous les plaisirs est pour moi. I'm so sorry, the pleasure is all mine.
So, is it true that you invented one of the first digital calculators?
Ah, yes, the Pascaline. My father was a tax collector, and he needed a faster way to make the necessary calculations. Don't get me started on French monetary structure. No me bon.
And you are also well known for your inventions such as the syringe and the hydraulic press.
Yes, you embarrass me, of course. I did a lot of stuff, as you say, but let me tell you what I am most impressed with.
What would that be, Mr. Pascal?
Deft Pascal, a color computer with as little as 32K of RAM, can be used to develop software using the programming language named after myself.
I'm not following you.
Pascal Workbench provides a complete development environment for your color computer. Edit your Pascal source code, compile it, and then run it. C'est très facile. Don't forget the excellent debugger. You can set breakpoints, examine variables in memory locations. You can even singly step through your code. Très bon.
That is impressive.
Oui, very impressive.
Well, folks, there you have it. Pascal on Pascal.
Pardon? Are these donuts for anyone?
Sure, help yourself. Where are you off to next, Mr. Pascal?
I have spent much time studying probable outcomes. Time for some applied science. I'm headed to Vegas, baby. Time to redefine Pascal's wager.
Deft Pascal for the TRS-80 color computer. From Deft Systems Incorporated.
Fred.
Yeah?
Remember when I wanted to run the business on a color computer?
Yeah.
And you said it was too hard to move back and forth through all those different programs.
Yeah.
And you said all the software would cost $1,000.
Yeah.
Well, you want to hear something?
No.
VIP Library integrates all the applications we need, and guess who sells it?
Tiny Tim.
No, SD Enterprises.
Swell.
All 6 VIP applications are combined onto one disk. VIP Database, VIP Writer, VIP Spell, VIP Calc, Terminal, and Disk Zap. So we can do mail merge, finances, correspondence, all with VIP Library.
Yeah?
Yeah, and it's not $1,000. It's just $169.95.
Wonderful.
Finally, we'll have time to go see a movie.
No.
VIP Library, the only integrated application suite your CoCo will ever need.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back. We're going to have a little host discussion on sort of a topic, not quite du jour, but relevant to the time, without relating to either COVID or to riots in the street.
That's a good thing.
I mean, it could relate to rioting, I suppose, but it's not in this case. So we have a tweet from, not directed to us, but just in general to the world, from a Josh Malone. And so his tweet says, all the things that, quote, belong in a museum are somehow safer than with private collectors, ? And it says, if the LCM plus L, that's Living Computer Museum and Labs, can go poof, I'm not sure that belongs in a museum is quite a valid cry anymore. And so, of course, we're talking about some people, it's not that uncommon for people to think that certain things are so important or so rare that it's not appropriate just for any old person that has to write a big check and pick it up and carry it away with it. And so in the greater retro computing community, this might include, say, like an Apple I, which there's only, a handful of them still in the world. It's a little more than a handful, but there's only a few of them. I'm not sure those are kind of put on the pedestal quite to the extent of only a museum should ever have them. But there might be something like that. But in the CoCo world, I'm going to pick on Boise a little bit and say, well, so maybe that CoCo 4 mock-up thing is one of a kind. If it got dropped and broken, it'd be gone forever. I'm not sure it has the same importance as some other things because it's so one of a kind, but if you attach that, was there ever going to be a CoCo 4 from Tandy thinking to it? Maybe it is so rare that some people might think, well, instead of just sitting in Boise's garage down there in Louisiana, maybe we should put that in the Smithsonian or something. Now, the Smithsonian may not want it, but it was not unreasonable to think it should be in a museum or whatever, right? But what happens if you put it in a museum? I mean, we've already seen this not that long ago with a museum up near Asheville, I think, that burned down.
Oh, yeah, that was
right.
sad.
Yeah.
So, it belongs in a museum. So are there things that belong in a museum in the retro computing world, or particularly the CoCo corner of the retro computing world? And if so, what are they? And then how do you answer the fact that museums seem to be having financial troubles or burning down or whatever, just like anybody else's house might? Granted, they'd be slightly less likely to be stored in a basement that floods or something like that if they're at a museum rather than a house, but it's not impossible that they could still be damaged. Any thoughts on that?
Well, you picked on me, so I guess I'll speak up.
Okay.
As someone who collects or has a collection of rare items in the CoCo world, I'm kind of torn by this because obviously I know how to take care of the stuff that I have and I keep it safe and in the climate control environment, etc. But at the same time, I think these kinds of pieces, like the piece you mentioned, need to be seen, right? Not necessarily put in the hands of a private collector. There's a risk whether you put it in a museum, as you noted, or a private collector has it. So I'm not sure what the best answer is. I think these museums will eventually open up again. They're not going to go away forever. Obviously, no one's really going to a museum at this point anyway. So if something is in my in my office under a vinyl wrap, or it's in a museum where nobody can go anyway. What's the difference?
Yeah,
that's true. Well, I think there's another thing at play here. It's almost kind of an anachronism, the museum concept, because we've got everything on the internet. I mean, you pretty much can have the equivalent. You can even tour most museums through the internet. And I think the fact that you can make these things available, as you've made it available in your book. You'll probably feature it at some point in your CoCo Collector series.
Yeah.
Your CoCo 4. So you're protecting your, and to some degree, it belongs to you. I mean, I understand that you want to make it available to the greater CoCo community, but you are doing a good job of being curator for that. And we know where it is, and we know that it's safe. And if you did give it to a museum, it could sit on a shelf for 15 years before anyone decides that they're going to display it, because there's so much to show. They have to fight for a window of time to display your item. So in reality, when things are in an individual's hands, you probably have more access to it over the internet than you would at a museum.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it's kind of made me think, well, I don't know if anyone else ever heard someone say that something to the effect of that the ideal form of government would be an enlightened dictator. Somebody who has absolute power to do exactly the right thing and does it. And of course, it's completely impractical because none of us are enlightened enough, I guess, to do that. Or at least nobody who would be able to agree on who the dictator should be. So maybe it breaks down there, but maybe the perfect situation for this is someone who is a private collector who can decide to take something out and move it around and take it to live events like CoCo Fest or Tandy Assembly or whatever, put things on display where people who know what they are, who can appreciate them, can see them, maybe even touch them.
That's a risk in and of itself too, right?
Well, of course it is, but
back and forth and stuff.
It is, but maybe that's the best situation. They put these TV shows on like the Learning Channel or whatever that's called like Mysteries of the Museum or whatever, where they'll go into especially some backward or unknown museums, in the middle of the country somewhere, and say, well, they've got this display here and it's got, Paul Bunyan shoelaces or something like that. and it's like, well, these really are the shoelaces that Paul Bunyan were wearing when he captured Babe the Blue Ox, or, and of course I'm taking a little liberty with the truth or whatever, but you put something in a museum that nobody can go to, then you might as well have thrown it away, right? Or not much worse than that, or not much better than that. And like you say, the risk that I think most people think about when we're going to let some private collector, some private capitalist come and use the money he stole from the proletariat to pay for something and then squirrel it away and no one ever sees it again. Right. Obviously, these things can happen when we have people who own items. But, if we did have, if we could somehow summon somebody from the Smithsonian to come to CoCo Fest and pick up an item or two, then they'd probably head right back to Washington and find the deepest, darkest corner of whatever museum or whatever warehouse still has a space on a shelf, and they'd put our beloved CoCo stuff on that space, and that's where it would sit for the next 50 years. So how would that help anybody,
Yeah, I'm going with the private collector. See, the thing, I've thought about the museum. I was toying with the idea for the last couple of years of opening up an exhibit at the local museum here just in town, in my city. Mm-hmm. But the problem is with that, it's such a limited audience. So it's just kind of like what you guys are saying, that not a lot of people are you're not going to get a lot of traffic for it, and you have to have people that are interested in it. But I think by taking it around to, retro computer shows, that sort of thing, doing a display, it's going to get more exposure. And I also believe that a private collector is going to take better care of the stuff. Because, you own it. It's yours. You kind of have an attachment to it. Otherwise, if you didn't have the space, or, you got out of the hobby, maybe, then donate, to a museum or something, or another private collector. But I'm going with that.
Certainly, when you own a piece that's rare, I think you have an obligation to take care of it.
Yeah.
You don't have to take it with you to CoCo Fest if you don't want to.
No.
I've done that one time, I think, with the CoCo 4 and the Deluxe CoCo. I think right after Bill and I wrote the book.
Right.
But the motivation there was to show it off because no one knew about the CoCo 4 especially.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you document it well, like do the CoCo Collector thing that I'm doing, record it,
right,
show all the angles, and it's there on YouTube in perpetuity, then that's a good thing.
For sure.
Definitely.
Because, I mean, you figure that CoCo 4 got more exposure just from what you did versus sitting in a museum somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
I think that covers it. So this stuff is important to us, but there's not enough of us to mean that it's important to the country or the world. And so you say some of this stuff may seem really important and rare or whatever, and it should be in a museum, but that doesn't make it important enough that the museum will actually put it on display or that anybody will go see it there,
Right, and I'll just add another thing, is that the CoCo is typically not the attraction for a computer museum. If it's not Commodore or Atari, I would worry that the CoCo would not get the exposure, or those pieces wouldn't get the exposure that...
A lot of times, even places that cover Tandy don't include the CoCo just as an oversight.
That's right.
Sure. And, I mean, the field gets really crowded, too, if you look at all the different computers from the same period.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, I guess that's the thing. We just have to be our own museums.
That's right.
Yep.
Pretty much.
So then we just have to travel around and visit each other as much as we can with all the social distancing restrictions.
Yeah.
This used to be called computer festivals.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You guys have to come down and have some barbecue and check out my pile. All right. Well, does that do it for this topic?
That's it.
I think so.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for another lovely discussion. And we'll just have to draw this one to close and leave you to the rest of the show.
Dino Wars. 65 million years ago, giant carnivorous beasts roamed the earth, fighting for territorial dominance. The only rule? Survive. Each player controls a rampaging dinosaur. If you aren't quick, you'll find yourself ruthlessly attacked by your opponent. Develop your maneuvering skills. Then declare an all-out dino war on your opponent. Dino Wars requires a TRS-80 color computer with 2 joysticks, 16K of memory recommended. From Radio Shack.
Computer Plus. If you're looking for Radio Shack computers, peripherals, and software, there's no better source than Computer Plus. Computer Plus. Computer Plus offers a wide range of modems from Tandy, Radio Shack, and Hayes. Plus. Dot Matrix and Daisy Wheel printers from Radio Shack, Smith Corona, Epson, Okidata, Star, Panasonic, Silverreed, and more. Plus. Color and monochrome monitors from Radio Shack, Amdek, Taxon, and more. Plus. Computer Plus stocks a wide array of popular software titles for any Tandy computer. Plus. Computer Plus features the lowest possible prices, best warranties possible, knowledgeable and friendly service staff, timely delivery, and the convenience of ordering by phone. Computer Plus. Find out for yourself why so many computer hobbyists and business professionals purchase their computers and peripherals from Computer Plus. Computer Plus.
All right, welcome, CoCo Cruisers. This month we've got a little bit of a special treat for you, an interview with someone from back in the day. This time, instead of someone that was directly making products for the CoCo world per se or whatever, it's someone with more of a retail perspective on that time period of our lives. So we've got with us Mr. Fran Purcell. Hello, Fran. How are you?
I'm fine, John. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Neil's not currently with us, but we do have Mike Rowan. Hello, Mike.
Hello, everybody.
And, of course, we've got Boise Pete. Hello, Boise.
Hey, guys. Great to be here.
Cool.
Likewise.
So, Fran, so far I haven't known you very long, but you don't seem very shy. So I think we'll just start tossing it to you and letting you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Radio Shack or Tandy and anything along those lines. It sounds like you were already a bit of a technical person who was spending a lot of times at Radio Shack as a kid anyway. So
True, yes.
go ahead and start wherever you feel like, and I'm sure we'll have questions from there.
I guess back in the mid-'70s, I'm going to say 1976, I began working at a local store called the Music Shack. It was a little record and tape store, and the gentleman who owned it, his name was Fred Brookings. He also did electronics. He did car stereos and home stereos. And I worked there for a year in high school, and while I was in college, I worked there part-time. And in the late 70s, probably 1977, we got a visit from someone who represented the Radio Shack franchise dealer division. They ended up coming in our store because the local drugstore who we went in first wasn't interested in becoming a Radio Shack franchise. So he stopped in and gave us the pitch. We thought it would be a good line to add to the store. As far as franchises go, at the time it seemed very affordable. For $5,000, they would come in, they would give you a big Radio Shack sign, they would help you with your advertising, feature you in their local flyer, set you up with their free battery card, and things like that. It was a great deal. So we took them up on it and got the Radio Shack product. This is obviously kind of pre-handy computers.
Sure.
A couple years went by. They let us know that there was another local franchise available in the next town over, which was Ayer, Massachusetts. What they did is they went to small towns that were under 5,000 people and were 7 or 8 miles from a company-owned Radio Shack store because they didn't want to impact, their corporate stores.
Right.
And, so they branched out and tried to hit these small towns, which, they're not going to stick a Radio Shack store in a small town with 5,000 people. It probably isn't worth their while. But, by focusing on existing businesses and, just want to add to the product line, it was a good fit.
Sure.
I mean, as far as franchises go, for $5,000, you really can't go wrong.
What year was that, Fran?
That was in 1977.
Just to clarify that, 1977, $5,000 then would be worth today $21,270. So basically, close to 4 times the amount, I guess.
Which, when you think about as far as a franchise goes,
it's not a horrible fee. No,
pretty cheap. And
yeah, it's achievable. Yeah,
like the cost of a car.
I mean, the other nice thing about it is they really had no control over your business. They just wanted you to represent their line in the way you wanted to represent it, and try to give them $10,000 a year worth of business. That's not too hard to do.
Yeah.
After I got out of college in 1978, another franchise became available in the next town over called Ayer, Massachusetts. And if you're familiar with Ayer, Massachusetts at all, it's right next to the Fort Devens Army base. So if you're at all familiar with retail locations around Army bases, you're busy like 2 days a month. You're busy the first of the month when the GIs get paid, and you're busy the 15th of the month when the GIs get paid. So the rest of the time you're looking for something to do. So how I got involved with the computers is, while I was running that store, I had a customer that had bought a TRS-80 Model 1 and needed a disk drive for it. Radio Shack was backlogged, back-ordered 3, 4, 5, 6 months on these disk drives. So I did a little research and found a company called the CPU Shop in Charleston, Massachusetts. It was buried in the bowels of Charleston up by the Bunker Hill Monument. This company actually went out and manufactured like a case, a power supply, and a disk drive, which was, Model 1 compatible. I hooked up with this guy, went to his place. It's kind of weird. You walk into this apartment, and he's got like a machine shop set up in his living room. He's got an oscilloscope over here to adjust the drives. We just started talking, and while I was there, he was on the phone with a customer, and I heard him say to the customer, "No, I don't have any Radio Shack expansion interfaces. I just sell the drives." And after he got off the phone, I said, "Well, I can sell your Radio Shack expansion interfaces." So This was probably 1979. This guy started buying expansion interfaces from me, and his store did quite well. He ended up opening a retail store in Charleston, which actually morphed into 11 or 12 more retail stores in New England. They ended up ditching the CPU shop name, and they called themselves Computer City. It wasn't the Computer City owned by Tandy afterwards. This was a predecessor to that. He probably bought thousands of these expansion interfaces from me. I mean, the item retailed for $299 at the time. And what these companies did is they bought them, inserted their own memory, which Radio Shack at the time was charging $300 per 16K. So he was able to offer these expansion interfaces, not as being a Radio Shack store, to go along with his disk drives. So it worked out really well for him. Then I started thinking about it. I go, well, if this guy is doing it, then maybe there's other people that want these. So I walked across the street to the local bookstore, and I bought any magazine that had anything to do with the TRS-80, like 80 Micro and Kilobaud and Byte Magazine. I went through all of these, and anybody who sold software or hardware for the TRS-80, I either called and introduced myself and told them what I could do, or sent them a letter. Because a lot of mail order companies back then didn't, believe it or not, didn't publish their phone number. It was just an address, send your money here kind of thing. So I started selling not only expansion interfaces, but other Radio Shack product to these folks. And, a lot of the well-known people at the time, like Scott Adams from Adventure International, he was a big software guy. He was one of our customers. There was another gentleman from the Midwest called Level 4 Products. He was another big guy. Tom Mix Software was one of our customers. One of the customers I picked up happened to be a store in Milford, New Hampshire. He was a software publisher called TSE Softside, I believe. He had a retail store. It was called Hardside, I believe. He was one of my customers. One day when I was delivering stuff up there, I got chatting with the guy that worked there. He was interested in exploring other options, and him and I said, gee, why don't we do something? So him and I spoke to the owner of our company, Fred, and he gave us the green light. That's how Computer Plus got started.
Wow.
You're right at the cusp of personal computers becoming popular. You got in just right at the right time.
Every now and then you luck out and you catch the wave just right. It was great timing. I mean,
so for the listeners, you haven't brought this up yet, Fran, but what got me to find you was, and anyone who's listening to our podcast will know that the Rainbow had in the very front page, when you open the front cover, the first page you would see to the right was an ad from a company called Computer Plus out of Littleton, Massachusetts. That ad ran for years and years and years. I bought 2 CoCo 3s and a CM8. I should say my parents bought 2 CoCo 3s and a CM8 from Computer Plus. And the thing that always struck me was your prices were so much cheaper than the list price at pretty much any Radio Shack store. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I do want the listeners to know that Computer Plus is, Fran, sort of that was the company you were affiliated with, and that's kind of what connected me to you to the podcast. So this is very interesting now, because this is what ties into the CoCo and the Rainbow.
Right. Obviously, the Rainbow came out after we went into business, but I mean, we first advertised in 80 Micro and Byte Magazine and Kilobaud Magazine and a few other magazines at the time. Then we connected with the first dedicated computer magazine I remember was Color Computer News. It was, a very small publication written by a gentleman named Bill Sias. I believe he was out of the Midwest. We connected with him. The gentleman I was working with, his name was Jack Torres. He was the gentleman that used to work at Hardside, who came to work for Fred and myself. He had a very good background in marketing. His dad owned a disinfecting company called the Red Cross Nurse. which supplied grocery stores. I'm pretty sure nationwide they supplied grocery stores with disinfectant products. Jack was very familiar with dealing with graphic artists and ad agencies and things like that. So, I knew nothing about that. We were a very good fit. I was more the sales technical guy, customer service guy. Jack handled all of the graphic design. Obviously we talked about where we should put our ads and, what the owner could afford. It was just crazy. I mean, back then, everything was a challenge. I mean, even when we had to order our Watts lines, our 800 numbers, it took New England Telephone, which is one of the Baby Bell companies, a month just to tell us what our phone number was going to be. And here we are, trying to do ads, and we don't even know what our phone number is. And so they finally kind of verbally committed, we're pretty sure this is what you're going to get for a phone number. And we kind of ran with it. I believe our first ad was in February of 1981 in 80 micro. Our Watts lines, our 800 numbers, didn't start working until 2 months after that.
Wow.
They physically had to run wires from Lawrence, Massachusetts, which was like 30 miles north of Littleton, into Littleton to get a Watts line.
Wow.
I mean, when you think about it, nowadays you just pick up the phone and you go, hey, I want a Watts line. You plug your Cat 5 cable in and you have a Watts line. I mean, it's...
Right.
They probably would say, what's the hell is that?
It's just so much easier. One day, Jack and I was sitting there. I mean, obviously for those first 2 months, the only business we got were folks that didn't mind paying, the $1 for the call to our standard non-toll-free number. Once the line started ringing, they never stopped.
Wow. So I noticed on the ad there's an 800 number. I got to ask you, Fran, did you get kids calling saying, hey, my CoCo does this, why does it do that? Did they do that stuff?
We had an awful lot of technical calls on our sales 800 line, but we always did our best to help people out.
So I got to admit, I actually did that a couple of times. And the second time I did it, I think somebody basically said, hey, kid, this isn't for tech help. It might have been you that answered the phone.
Please call our local number for any technical support you need, But initially, if you look at our first couple of ads, maybe the first year of our ads, it lists an address of 245A Great Road in Littleton. And what that was, a friend of mine had a Texaco station, and attached to his Texaco station, he had a small retail store, which he tried renting out and never worked out for people. It never worked out for him. But we actually rented this space from him. Just think about a 70s vintage gas station with your pumps out front. We're like stuck on the left of this building. The rent was $400 a month, so the rent was really cheap. Jack and I were there for probably 6 or 8 months by ourselves. Then we had to hire a couple of folks to help us out because it just got crazy. Something else we did when Color Computer News that Bill Sias was involved with came out, we talked to him and we said, hey, Bill, why don't you send us, as many of your magazines as you want, a box of them, 2 boxes of them, whatever. And every CoCo we send out, we'll toss one in the box. So, imagine getting a brand new CoCo 1 at the time. And, there's not really a lot out there for it. All you have is like 80 micro, which was, not really a CoCo dedicated magazine. And you get this magazine that just speaks about the color computer.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea.
You guys did that with the Rainbow, too, because when I bought my CoCo 3 from you, well, my dad did in November of 1986, the December 1986 issue of the Rainbow was at the top inside the box when I opened up the box of the CoCo 3. I will never forget it. It's one of my favorite issues, and I'm sure you guys did that for Fall Soft.
We not only did it with Bill Sias's magazine, but we did it with Rainbow magazine also. Yep. And I know it helped their subscription. I mean, it helped everybody.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, it was great.
that's kind of how it all got started. It kind of grew from there.
You had mentioned in other conversations I had with you that you attended Rainbow Fests.
I did.
Take us back to that time. Like, for a lot of us, I shared with you that I couldn't go because I was a kid, but what was it like whenever you went? How was it? What was the environment? What was it like for you guys?
It was great. I mean, we, obviously being on the East Coast, we always did the ones in New Jersey. They were in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and Princeton, New Jersey. We did those all the time. We did the Chicago one a couple times. I mean, it was just so energy-packed. Everybody there, exhibitors and customers, all they cared about was the color computer. I mean, it wasn't like a lot of computer shows from that era, like the Northeast Computer Show and things like that. They were so broad-based that, they didn't really have a focus. But this one was bang focused, right on the color computer. So it was a really great crowd. We had a lot of fun. Good sales out of it as well.
Tell us a little bit about the logistics of getting to Chicago.
So, being in Massachusetts, what we used to have to do was we obviously had a Radio Shack store, which we were separate from. We had to steal one of the employees that worked at the Radio Shack store because, myself and another employee from Computer Plus would go to Chicago. So we had to leave some of our people back at Computer Plus to run the business while we were gone.
Sure.
What we would do is we would, load up our 24-foot box truck, send it off to Chicago. And this was, back before cell phones and whatnot. So myself and the other person who went with me were kind of freaking out on the way to the hotel. Hope our truck made it. Our truck was supposed to be here 3 hours ago. It was crazy. Fortunately, everything always worked out, and the truck and our product was there when we got there.
Wow.
The ones in New Brunswick and Princeton were a little easier because myself and two other individuals drove down in the truck, so we kind of knew where our stock was.
Did you sell out at that show?
The only show I remember selling out of was the show that was right after the CoCo 3 was introduced.
That would have been 1986 Princeton, October 1986.
Okay. So we had gotten, I think it was either 200 or 300 CoCo 3s. Wow. We had a deal with people at the Radio Shack local franchise office to even get them because they were out, but they weren't really out in huge supply.
Hot commodities.
So we lucked out, and we ended up getting 200 or 300 of them, and we went down there with a totally full truck between those and the disk drives and the expansion interfaces and the multipath interfaces. Anything we thought we could peddle for the CoCo, we brought with us. And I remember, I think the show was 3 or 4 hours on Friday. We sold 100 of them right away. I mean, they were gone. They were gone that evening. I mean, it wasn't only us selling them. Radio Shack was there, and they had some, but they didn't have as many as us. So that kind of made us feel good. So I think we sold them for $169 at the time. Yep. We sold the first 100 on Friday, and the other 100 or 200 was gone Saturday, and we had none left to sell on Sunday.
You must have felt like a rock star. I bet you it's like women throwing themselves at you on the stage, right? Oh, CoCo 3, CoCo 3.
I mean, it's like people are just walking up. Yeah, I'll take 2 of them. I'll take 3 of them. I'll take 4 of them. It was
wow.
It was a good time. It was a good time.
I'll bet.
You mentioned $169. I'm looking at the Computer Plus ad in the December 1986 issue of the Rainbow, and that's exactly what you were selling the 128K CoCo 3 for.
Right.
$169. How did you guys get? I mean, obviously you had a price advantage, right? There was you and there was another vendor in the Rainbow that was also a Radio Shack franchise, and I'll have to go find their ad. But neck and neck, you guys were always quite a bit lower than the local Radio Shack. How did you do it? Would you just buy by volume, or what was the secret to getting that price down?
You know, the weird thing about being a Radio Shack franchise, a dealer, is everybody paid the same price. I mean, if I bought one CoCo or if I bought 100 CoCos, they would be the same price. Radio Shack never gave us a better price than anybody else, which kind of leveled the playing field because, you know, we didn't have to worry what this guy was paying versus us because we knew what he was paying. He was paying the same exact price we were. So, I mean, you know, it's like any other commodity item. We worked on very low margins. I think we made, you know, 10%. So on a $169 color computer, we probably made $18 to $20. Right. So it was very low margins. But when you're selling 200 or 300 of them, you know, that's okay.
Did you upset the local, like the actual Radio Shack stores around you? Because I'll tell you that in the 1986 October 1986 Rainbow Fest that you alluded to, where you sold all those CoCo 3s out, there was a round table at that event, and it was recorded, and we have the audio online. And Barry Thompson from Radio Shack was at that round table, and someone brought up in the audience a question about buying a CoCo 3 for less than the Radio Shack store sold it. And Thompson alluded to the fact that there were some franchises that would undercut the price of the local company stores. But, you know, he felt like, well, you didn't get the same support or whatever. Obviously, he was given the party line as a Radio Shack representative. But you, no doubt you guys had to have, like, you know, raised the hackles on the local company stores that couldn't sell those products at the discounts you were selling them, right? Right.
That's very true. I mean, when they bought it from us, remember the old Radio Shack receipts back in the day? They were actually handwritten receipts, you know, back in the 70s and the 80s. Yeah. You know, when we took an order, you know, we wrote it on a regular Radio Shack receipt. It had our store name, our store number on the receipt. And you're right. I mean, if a customer had an issue with their CoCo, like if you had a problem with one of yours, all you would have to do would be go into your local store and say, hey, I bought this from a Radio Shack dealer. You know, please fix it. Radio Shack would fix it and bill us for the repair.
The other vendor, Fran, that was also advertising like kind of neck and neck with y'all in the Rainbow around 87, 88, that was competitive on price was a company called Micro World Computer Center out of Wind Gap, Pennsylvania. I would look at prices, and they were like, they had CoCo 3s about the same price as you guys, you know, you know, $40, $50 cheaper than the company stores.
Right. Yeah, so we all paid the same, and I think by then a lot of people tried to jump into the business we were in afterwards, but it may have been because we were established and, you know, our ads looked better or whatever, but I don't know. We, for 8 or 9 years, was Radio Shack's largest dealer in the country. So I know I know we were doing it right, you know.
Well, you know, you guys had, at least in the Rainbow magazine, right, which was, I know you mentioned Color Computer News, but as far as subscription numbers, I think Rainbow had probably the largest amount, and you were right there in the front. When you lift that front cover up, there you are. So no doubt you were in prime real estate in the magazine, and the way that you structure your ads, and one of the questions I had was, when you look at a Computer Plus ad in the Rainbow, it's very distinctive, right? It says, from Computer Plus to you, plus after plus after plus, and you've got 6 boxes, you know, 3 across and then 3 below with highlighted products. Then this beautiful list of, here's everything from computers to printers to modems to software, and here's how much it costs. Who designed that ad for you guys? Is that a design y'all came up with, or did somebody else bring that to you? Because it was used a lot in subsequent years.
Right. That was designed by a friend of Jack Torres's. It was a graphic designer out of Milford, New Hampshire, that we used for all of our ads. This was back during, you know, the desktop publishing days. This guy actually hand drew most of that ad. I mean, it was it was amazing. I mean, he hand drew our logo because we saw some mock-ups of different logos. and he actually hand drew the logo, and he was an amazing artist. I mean, as the years went on, I think the ad started off black and white, and then, as magazines started going more color, we added some color to it also, which really brought the ad out.
I'm looking at one of your ads from a Rainbow 1985.
Yep.
And, looking at the logo, and it's interesting. Below it says since 1973.
So, remember the gentleman I mentioned, Fred Brookings?
Yes.
He actually started that Music Shack store in 1973. And we said, well, we're not really lying because we're owned by this we're owned by this gentleman. We're owned by this guy who's footing the bill for all this. So, let's put in since 1973 because that's when we really started.
Yeah,
and,
that's when the business started.
And, that might have helped us too because people say, hey, look, these people have been around for 5 or 6 years. I don't know what they were selling, but they've been around. Another funny story about the address. If you look at our first ads, you're going to see 245A Great Road. But on later ads, you're going to see 480 King Street.
Yep.
Remember you mentioned that there might have been some people in Radio Shack corporate that didn't really like us. Well, what had happened is somebody went into somebody with one of these ads and say, hey, who's this guy selling Radio Shack product at this address? Because there's no designated authorized Radio Shack store at this address.
Uh-huh.
So we got a call from our local sales office, and they say, hey, look, you guys got to pull your ads or you got to do something because Radio Shack Corporate doesn't want you advertising their product with a full warranty on a non-approved address.
Right.
So what we had to do is we had to change all of our ads to represent the actual address of the franchise, which was 480 King Street. So that's, we ended up not physically moving there for a good number of years, but our ads had to reflect that address, or else we might have gotten in trouble.
Another thing about your ad, I love the bullet points. Lowest possible prices, best possible warranty, knowledgeable sales staff, timely delivery, and shopping convenience. It's like it was really a lesson in how you could put an effective ad together. Like if you've got prime real estate, hey, show it off, baby.
Right.
You guys did it.
Right. Plus the magazines were very forthcoming about publishing letters that were, from happy customers of ours. Back in that time frame, when you got a letter to the editor that says you had great success with this company and they took good care of you, forget the Yelp reviews and the Google reviews. That was gold back then. That really helped our business because we did a good job taking care of people. We didn't back then. A lot of mail order companies, they would advertise a product, and legally they had 30 days to ship the product after it was paid for, but we never did that. Even if we had items on back order that we knew were coming in 3 days, we would not charge the customer until it was physically in the door and physically shipped, and we just thought that was the right way to do business.
Yeah, maybe saved you a lot of headaches.
What's the sense of charging somebody for a $300 computer and, making up excuses for a month why you haven't shipped it when you just don't charge their card until it's actually in your door? And it was the right thing to do, and we did well by it. That prompted a lot of positive letters to Rainbow and some of the other magazines about our business practices, which made us feel good.
That's awesome. Best customer experience or best customer have you had and worst customer you ever had? You don't have to name names.
No. The best customer, as far as quantity goes, there was a customer, I think he might have been in Montreal. He would actually go up to Maine on vacation and come visit us and fill up his van with computers. He probably bought 100, 150 computers off of us over the time frame we were there.
To resell?
I don't really know. I don't really know if he was driving them into Canada and reselling them or what he was doing with them. But he was probably the largest customer we had on a retail, not a wholesale level. The worst customer we ever had, I mean, like I mentioned, we did a really good job taking care of people. And the way I always looked at it was, what would I expect a company to do for me if I had a problem? We kind of flew with that. And most of the problems we had weren't really caused by us, but, you know, UPS stepped on a color computer or damaged the box. Or I remember one time we sent out a DMP 200 printer to a customer. This guy was actually very, very patient with us. So the guy gets this printer. He opens up the box, and it was full of 2x4s. So what had happened was, it looks to me like at least somebody possibly at UPS might have needed a printer. And they cut the printer out of the box and took the time to cut the 2x4s perfectly square to fit into this box.
Jeez.
So the way UPS handles claims like that is, the customer called UPS. UPS picked up the box full of 2x4s, brought it back to us. We then, in turn, we sent the customer a new printer, obviously, once we saw it was full of 2x4s.
Right.
And we had to deal with UPS loss prevention. Now, try convincing somebody at UPS that one of their employees put 2x4s in this box and took the printer. They weren't too keen on the idea. Fortunately for us, by then we had a very sophisticated shipping system where we put the box on the scale, we hit a button, it would weigh it down to the 1/10 of an ounce, and it would print the label. So we knew what the weight of the printer was when we shipped it. And while the guy was standing there, I said, well, put it on the scale. What's it weigh? And it weighed 4 pounds less than
right.
the printer weighed. I go,
right.
Well,
which is funny if you think about the printers of the day. They weighed 4 more pounds than a box full of 2x4s.
I mean, back in the day, they were heavier than they are now, at least.
Yeah.
And we went round and round, and we finally ended up getting paid. But that was probably the strangest things that happened to us.
Looking at the list here, again, looking at the ad, you have products from Tom Mix Software. You have VIP Writer. You have Max Fonts. You have TeleWriter.
Yeah.
Did you have relationships with these individual software vendors to sell their products through
we
your
did.
ads?
I mean, did you know that Tom Mix was the guy's name? I never knew that, but
he was out of Michigan, I think, right?
Yes, he was. Yeah. I mean, we met him at one of the Rainbow Fest shows. I never knew that was his real name, but until I actually met him. But we had relationships with Tom Mix, with Colorware, with all those vendors you see listed in the ad. And we purchased a product at, I don't know, maybe a 30% discount. We bought quantity of it, and we typically discounted it 10 or 15%.
Did you nurture those relationships, or would people actually approach you?
A little of both. A little of both. I mean, if you get a couple of calls, do you sell VIP Writer for $150 and you don't have it, you do your best to find it,
Right.
We reached out to some of these people to sell their product. We also sold, some third-party hardware.
Yep, I see that too. Yeah.
Remember, there's a company called Bowtech that used to make this really cool serial to parallel adapter. We sold those for a good number of years. If you remember, the thing came in a little blue project box, which actually was a Radio Shack project box.
Yep.
it worked out well because we actually sold them the project boxes at a discount. And they were, they were paying retail at their local Radio Shack. So we sold the project boxes to Bowtech, and we
awesome.
And we bought the product back from them. So
Fran, I could imagine back then. This is my image of you back then. You ever see those guys in the stock market pitch just throwing paper around? I can see with just $100 bills flying out your pocket with an apron, just going back and forth. You must have been a wheeler dealer kind of guy.
At the Rainbow Fest show, that was kind of a true story. I mean,
I bet.
back in the probably 83, 84 areas when things really started getting crazy, busy. And, by then we had 7 people working for us, 3 women on the phones, a dedicated shipper receiver, a dedicated technical guy, and Jack and I. So we did an awful lot with 7 people.
Yeah.
And one morning my wife says, hey, you were not only answering the phone in your sleep, but you were telling somebody how to wire up a cable in their sleep.
That's when you know you need to take a vacation.
That's when you know, things got a little crazy. And we had a hardworking group of people, and we did well.
Did you actually use any Tandy computers to run your business?
Well, the thing about it is we did use a computer, but we just used a computer to maintain a mailing list because there really wasn't any kind of software we could use to actually, this is back before Radio Shack was even computerized themselves.
Sure, yeah.
So in order for our customer to get their Radio Shack warranty, the receipt had to be handwritten on one of those old school Radio Shack 3-part receipts. We kept the white copy, sent the yellow one
to the customer, right?
To the customer. You probably still have those, Boise, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so that was the only way we could do it. So back then, even the credit card processing was totally different than it is now. There weren't any terminals. We had that old school imprint machine.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So what we would do is we would get a stack of blank credit card receipts, run them all through the imprinter. After we took all the customer information, their name, their address, their phone number, their credit card number, we actually had to rewrite that onto the credit card receipt. Then you don't get your money the next day like you do now. You had to take those hard copy receipts and mail them in.
Right.
Yeah. Amazing. So, wow.
I mean,
did you have to call for approvals on credit cards?
We did.
Yeah. Time.
I mean, they gave us this little newsprint pamphlet that we were supposed to look through to see if the credit card was stolen beforehand. And if we looked through that and it wasn't in that, then we had to call for an authorization. Yeah, so every one of those we had to pick up the phone, and it was done with a human. I mean, we actually talked to a person to get the approval. American Express at the time was the only credit card company that offered address verification. So, most of the people with American Express cards, they typically spent a little more than the folks with the Visa MasterCard. There was no Discover back then. So we had to call and verify the address and only ship to the billing address. For the number of credit cards we processed and for the handful of times that we got stiffed, it was very, very minimal.
In terms of the CoCo, the color computer line, the computer, of course, the CoCo 3 came out in '86. You mentioned that hot Rainbow Fest, right, where you sold out crazily.
Correct.
A couple of years, 3 years later, the CoCo 3, starts to tail off in sales and kind of ends in 1990 or so.
Yep.
How did Computer Plus's fate go along with that? Did you guys see a tail off in sales at some point with computers, and how did that play out over the years?
It did have an impact on us. Radio Shack started doing some weird things with their computer line in the early 90s. They bought a computer company called Grid, and they had an amazing manufacturing facility in Fort Worth, which it was awesome. I actually, we won a trip to Fort Worth because of our sales, and they actually let us tour the factory. And it was just amazing to see an American factory, banging off these CoCos and these other Tandy computers. But wow. A couple of years after that, I think they sold their computer manufacturing place to AST.
That's right.
They started kind of about the time Computer Plus closed. They started selling, I believe it was compact computers at their their retail stores.
That's right.
And but the last couple of years we were in business, we were basically there selling whatever we could get for Tandy computers. I mean, they had a couple of notebook computers that were doing okay. I know Tandy, what was it, 3500 or the 2500? They were selling those to digital. They were putting people's names on everything back then. And,
it just kind of got all mixed up for you, or what, in terms of how you sold stuff? Or?
Yeah, I mean, by then we were down to 4 people. People left, and they never got replaced and whatnot. And when it finally ended up closing in '93, it was just myself and one other person that was there.
Where was Computer Plus in the 90s? So the Rainbow closed down in 93. Obviously, you sold more than just CoCos, but that was a source of revenue. How did you guys get into the 90s and beyond?
I think Rainbow's last issue was what? April and May of 93?
Yeah, May 93.
April 93, yep.
We ended up closing up in January of 93. I do think a lot of that, we kind of made a decision from the get-go that we really just wanted to support Tandy computers and sell Tandy computers. Everybody was out there at that time selling IBM-compatible clones and things like that. We just didn't want to get involved with that. So the last couple of years we were in business, we basically just sold peripherals, laptop computer, a desktop computer Tandy had to sell us. And weird things started happening at Radio Shack too. I mean, we always dealt with a local sales office in Randolph, Massachusetts. They had a huge warehouse also in Randolph, Massachusetts, which stocked their top 600 items. So, us being 30, 45 minutes away, we would place an order and drive down there and pick stuff up. But probably about a year before we closed, they actually closed the local sales office, which meant we had to deal with people we didn't know in Fort Worth. And they closed the warehouse. So all of our items were shipped, I believe, from their Pennsylvania warehouse. Well, I don't know. I think it's just, a combination of them not coming out with new product, which people wanted. Obviously, the fact that they chose to get rid of the color computer, that was probably, I'm going to say, half of our business.
Wow.
That must have hurt.
Was the color computer and the color computer line. So that definitely hurt us. I mean, we hung in there selling what we could for as long as we could, but...
Yeah. That just goes to show the power of the CoCo, if you think about it. I mean, think about that. 50% of your business was color computer?
Yes.
It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's just astounding to me.
Yeah. We sold a lot of them.
Wow.
Yeah. We sold a lot of them. I wish I had an exact number on how many we sold, but...
So I could see you burning $100 bills to light cigars and saying, "This was a CoCo 3. This was a CoCo 3."
Well, I mean, I didn't own Computer Plus. I worked for a guy who took really good care of me, and he might have been lighting cigars with $100 bills, but it wasn't me.
Well, they're not that great. I mean, it kind of flavors the cigar in a bad way, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
So question about the logistics. So, here I am, right, as a kid. My mom and my dad are buying products from you guys in the South.
Yep.
Texas is just a state away.
Yep.
And I don't remember where they were shipped from, but you guys would actually ship them from Littleton to wherever, or you'd have the warehouse ship them?
Oh no, we would actually order the product from Radio Shack. The CoCo 3s, when they first came out, were shipped to us from Fort Worth, but once they became more readily available, they were actually in stock at our local warehouse in Randolph, Massachusetts.
Right.
So, we would place an order and go down to this warehouse and pick up what we thought we needed and bring them back to the shop in Littleton and, take the phone call, write the receipt, write the credit card receipt, charge it off, and stick a Rainbow magazine in it if we had any.
That's right, yeah.
And ship it out. I mean,
yeah,
we were really good about, shipping product the same day or the next day that the order was placed.
Yeah,
we had a lot of pride in that. We didn't want people getting upset that they got charged 2 weeks ago and their computer hasn't been shipped out yet. So we did a really good job taking care of our customers. Hopefully we took good care of your mom and dad when they
You did. 2 CoCo 3s in the CM8, and I was going to say my CoCo 3 was made in Korea, probably got shipped to the States in Fort Worth, I'm guessing, or some warehouse in South Carolina, probably made all the way to Massachusetts, got to you in Littleton just to come back down to the South. To my house. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Radio Shack didn't do any drop shipping or anything like that, so it's not like the warehouse situations now with Amazon and whatnot.
Everything's optimized to the hilt, no doubt.
Yeah, we physically ordered the product and got the product and shipped the product. We didn't, I don't think we would have trusted anybody else to get in the middle, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was all done in house.
Fran, what have we not covered? What have we not asked you about that you thought maybe we would?
Yeah, I think we covered everything that I had to say. I don't know if you guys have any other questions or whatnot, but
I've got one. It might be inappropriate, but since you're a male and not a female, maybe it's not quite as inappropriate. I'm going to ask you your age. And the reason why I'm going to ask you your age is because I'm looking at you on the video screen here, and it may not be perfect video, but you look like a spry young man. I would say you're about 45 years old looking at you. You look better than I do. But I'm guessing the math doesn't work out for you to be 45. So could you tell us how old you are?
The math doesn't work out. I was actually born in 1958, so I'm 62.
Okay. Well, that's not too old, but a little bit older than I think you look. So whatever you're doing, it's working for you.
Thank you.
Keep eating those grape nuts.
Yeah, something like that. Well, you're seeing me from the waist up. I think I'll look worse below. Yeah.
Maybe so. You still got most of your hair, at least, so that's pretty good.
I'm working on it, yeah. But, I started working for in high school, and Computer Plus started in 80. So I was 22. I was 22.
22, yeah, 22.
Started Computer Plus. So, yeah.
So I have a question. What are you up to these days?
So when the Radio Shack that owned Computer Plus went out of business in 1993, the owner, Fred, had some issues with the bank, which, might have helped lead to our demise as well. The bank actually came in one day and kindly asked us all to leave. So it was kind of surprising. The bank actually took over all of his assets. What happened after that was, it's like, gee, what am I going to do? I kind of been doing this most of my life. I really don't want to get a real job. So what I did is I went to the bank and I go, hey, what are you guys going to do with this Radio Shack store? And they said, well, why? I go, well, I'm interested in buying it. They came up with a number, and what I was hoping for was once I bought what was there, Radio Shack might consider reopening the franchise. Sure. But I guess there was a lot of bad blood between our owner and Radio Shack, so they didn't really want to reopen that as a Radio Shack store.
What year was that, Fran?
That was 1993. I ended up buying what was left of it from the bank in 93. And when I didn't get the Radio Shack dealership, I said, hey, you know what? I'm just going to try to make a go of this on my own. So I ended up stocking it with other people's pieces and parts and product. And 27 years later, I'm still doing the same thing. So I guess I can't complain.
Well, that's cool.
That's fantastic.
So when you walk into my store, you look on one side of it and you go, hey, those look just like the old gray Radio Shack racks from the 1980s. Well, that's kind of because that's what they are.
That's what they are.
What they are. I mean, it's the old gray Radio Shack racks. And
wow, yeah, I remember those.
So what's the name of your store?
Electronics Plus.
Okay, Electronics Plus.
Get the plus.
Okay. Electronics Plus. Yep.
Cool.
Wow.
Fran, really appreciate you talking to us. It's been very entertaining and informative. Really enjoyed it.
Look, I really appreciate you guys reaching out, and hopefully I said a few things that will some of your listeners might find amusing.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Oh, well, again, we appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Hope you have a pleasant evening, and, well, again, thanks.
Yeah, you too, guys. Yeah, take care, Mike, John, and Boise. Good night.
Take care.
All right, thanks.
Good night. Bye-bye.
The Dragon is back with 64K. Hey la, Dragon's back. Cereal port in the case is great. Hey la, Dragon's back. ROMs for two kinds with basic. New ways for you to be creative. Fully compatible with the Dragon 32.
Dragon Data Limited is proud to present the new Dragon 64. It has twice the memory of the Dragon 32, featuring a real serial communications port.
Get your Dragon 64 today. Hey la, Dragon's back.
Dragon Data Limited.
Learn how to use your computer for more than just games with Hot CoCo magazine. Hot CoCo is packed with business application programs, home management help, programming tips and tutorials, product reviews, and more. Subscribe for just $24.97 for 12 issues. That's 30% off the newsstand price. Let Hot CoCo show you how much time you can save with your color computer. And save even more time with Instant CoCo, the cassette version of Hot CoCo magazine, containing all of the programs that appear in the issue. See the latest issue of Hot CoCo magazine for details. Hot CoCo, available at fine retailers everywhere.
Hello, CoCo Cruisers. Welcome back. This is going to be a little impromptu, somewhat impromptu. Not quite as prepared as I usually do, but hopefully it'll still be entertaining tech segment. Someone asked me to go into a little more detail about LFSR, which is a software technique for generating random numbers. Well, I thought it might be good. Maybe I can make it interesting enough. So, hold on, let's see where we get with it. Okay, so the real point is random numbers. How do you generate random numbers? Well, the thing is computers really can't generate truly random numbers. If you think about it, if you know much about computers at all, it ought to be pretty obvious why that is, since computers just execute programs. They execute code one after the other. The results for the same code and the same input should always be the same, right? If you have a computer that's not doing that, then it probably needs service. Of course, we have uses for random numbers, or at least numbers that seem random, particularly for video games or any other kind of game, whether it's video game or text game or whatever, and maybe for some other things, for statistical sampling or some other things you might do in a lab. So how do you do it, right? Well, there's a variety of techniques. If you look for generating random numbers, you'll find a number of hits on the internet. Found one that suggests you can have physical sources. You can actually go out and flip a coin. Not very good for a computer. Theoretically, you could hook up a microphone and put it in some place with like a fan or other source of what's called white noise, basically that sound kind of like waves of the ocean or whatever, that kind of covers the entire spectrum of sound with noise. And so theoretically, you could sample that and get a source of random numbers that would correspond to the amount of randomness in the noise, right? Whether or not that works out, we had some links recently about John Mark Mobley, I think, was hooking up an AM radio, which should be somewhere, depending on how exactly you've hooked it up, to that source of noise, and he had kind of mixed results. So your mileage may vary. There are some various techniques. You can start with sort of less random data, do some calculations and some kind of statistical stuff and make it look more random, whatever. Mostly what you do is use some form of what we call a pseudo-random number generator. And so pseudo-random, pseudo means kind of, like or similar or acts like or, something like that. And so pseudo-random numbers are numbers that kind of appear in a sequence that is difficult for humans to predict what's coming next, but they're not actually random. And so typically this involves some sort of mathematical equation that just kind of iterates over itself. And, sometimes I've seen a lot of that basically take the existing value of this random number generator and add this other random value and then divide by this other value, and whatever you get, that's the next value. And there may be some good math about that, and there's probably a name for that. I don't actually know what it's called, and I'm not convinced that it's super well supported for randomness, but some people use them and have good results. So looks like that might be called a linear congruential generator. I don't know. Anyway, one that has been commonly used back to the early days of video games, probably because not only is it fairly easy to implement in software, it's also fairly easy to implement in hardware, is something called a linear feedback shift register, or LFSR. You might glean the name shift register as part of that. And so the basic structure of an LFSR, as you might imagine, is essentially a shift register. So you have a collection of 1-bit memory values like flip-flops, chained one to the other, so that the output of one feeds the input of the next. And that basic structure, you would have a common clock, and so you just would clock through, and the bits would travel one to the next. This is commonly used for like serial communications, where you load all the bits at once and then shift them out one bit at a time, or shift them in one bit at a time. But that's not exactly what we're talking about. So the other part of that LFSR, the LF part, is the linear feedback. Basically what you're doing is taking bits from the LFSR, bits from the current value, and applying a mathematical step to them, or typically it's an XOR, feeding that back into the input. Because of the action of that exclusive OR at re-entering at a few points in the chain, you get some variation. So if you look up the LFSR entry on Wikipedia, there's a whole lot of stuff there, a lot of math, a lot of examples. One thing that you quickly glean from there is that there's more than one way to build an LFSR. The biggest ones, the biggest differences is a Fibonacci LFSR, which kind of puts the XOR tree to the side of the shift register and kind of taps from multiple points within the shift register. And then something called a Galois. I'm assuming it's French, maybe it's Galois. It says named after a French mathematician. So, Galois LFSR. This one takes each exclusive OR gate and kind of embeds it in the chain, so that instead of every bit's, every flip-flop's output going to the next flip-flop, Some of them feed into the XOR, and the XOR gate output feeds to the next flip-flop. But it turns out that essentially equivalent, or somewhat equivalent, for the details of how they differ, you have to check out the web page there, the Wikipedia page. But the point being is that you can get essentially the same sequences from essentially the same inputs or seed values, depending on exactly how you implement them. And from looking from the sample implementations, at least to my eye, the Galois implementation is easier to implement in assembly language or about anything. If you're implementing in C, well, they've already implemented it for you, so there's that. But simpler implementation in assembly language makes them faster. They're already fairly fast either way, but that much faster, that much better, especially if you're using them in something like a game. Implementing them is mostly an exercise for the listener. Like I said, there are C implementations. That gives you a pretty good start. You know, if you're trying to implement one and you need more help than that, well, you can send a note. I don't promise, but it might be interesting enough that I'll try to help you. It shouldn't be too difficult to implement. And if you need to implement random numbers in whatever language you're using, almost every language has, as long as you have bitwise operations, where you can do, logic gate type operations, and you should be implement either form of LFSR in whatever programming language you're using, either of those two forms at least. There are some other variations, which could be more or less difficult. Anyway, when you pick an LFSR, you need to decide basically on the width of the stored value, the current value, and that's going to influence how many random numbers you can get in the sequence before you repeat. Also influencing that will be what's called the feedback polynomial. And the polynomial, I don't know why they do it this way, but it's a way of encoding where you place the taps for your XOR values that expresses it as a little equation like x squared plus x plus 1. Or, x to the 20th plus x to the 17th plus 1. Anyway, it's just what they do. The exponents in those equations relate to where you put the taps for your XOR. And depending on which equation you use and which size of your current value, it'll determine the period as far as how many numbers can you generate before you repeat, which could be important because the polynomials that have fewer taps, that's fewer times you have to compute XOR, which isn't difficult, but it's still one more thing to do. If you have fewer taps, it'll be that much cheaper to execute, and of course, it might the width of the current value might influence that as well. Turns out there's not that many variations, so it's probably not a big performance gain to pick just the right polynomial or whatever, but your mileage may vary. But there's known sets of polynomials that will repeat in certain sequences, and there'll be some polynomials, if you just start picking your own, you might pick one that repeats kind of prematurely. So like if you had a 16-bit current value that somehow would loop in 64 tries or something, that'd be kind of dumb to have that many bits just to have the loop that often. But again, your mileage may vary. The biggest thing when you're using a LFSR is you want to make sure it never gets seeded with a value of 0. Because if you think about it, 0 is just going to shift out and you get 0 back in every time. And you have the XORs that are supposed to theoretically change the value from time to time. But if all the values are 0, then the XORs are always going to come back the same. So you don't want to use a 0. You'll end up with your LFSR just generating nothing but garbage. So how do you get your seed in the first place? Well, you can start with a set number, and that can be useful because, like about any pseudo random number generator, if you always start with the same value, you'll always get the same sequence. And so if you want to use your LFSR to then generate, say, a graphical landscape or a treasure map or something like that, so long as it generates it the way you want it the first time, if you always start from the same place, you'll always get the same sequence. In fact, this is how the Atari Pitfall is renowned for having generated its screens that way, which saves you from having to store all that in ROM, for example. So what's a good way to get your seed? You can, like I say, you can always use the same value if you want. If you're using it to control enemy movement, for example, that means your game's always going to play about the same, or at least it's always going to start about the same. So you usually want something else to influence that. So one technique I've used is you can have a counter that starts, when the game starts, you can start counting just a free counter, say from 0 to 250, 1 to 255, and then back to 1. And then the first time someone hits the keyboard, you freeze that value and then use that to generate your seed. That's probably random enough that that combined with the fact that you're using an LFSR, no one will be able to easily detect, or with their human brain at all detect that you're using a certain algorithm for your random values. So there you go. Like I say, you use kind of a spinning counter as a seed generation for your linear feedback shift register. You pick a set of a polynomial and a proper width so that your LFSR will then generate enough variables to be useful before it loops. And then, once it... No one will remember how many times you've... if you pick a big enough number for the loop size, no one will remember that this is the, 3,000th or whatever time you've checked the variable. They probably don't know exactly when you're checking the random number generator anyway. So it preserves the illusion of truly random numbers. Generally speaking, that's good enough, especially for computer games on a 40-year-old computer played by 50-year-old men reliving their time when they were 10. So I do use an LFSR in Farfall. Use it to generate the sequences for the platforms. I use it for generating the sizzle sound when you die. I think I use it for a couple of other things as well, but anything that needs random numbers, I use it. Oh, I was going to say, so for example, you picked a 16-bit value for your current value, your seed value for your LFSR. Some things are random, and you only need to pick, say, from between 1 and 4, for example. You really only need 2 bits for that. So you can you can increment your LFSR and then just look at any given 2 bits. And it doesn't have to be the bottom 2 bits. It could be bits 13 and 14 or 10 and 11, or it could be, 9 and 13. I mean, whatever 2 bits you want. Based on that, if you have some kind of unrelated things happening, so for example, like the flame effect at the top of the screen in Farfall, you could increment your LFSR once, use some of the bits for like the flame effect and some other of the bits for the patterns for the platforms. And then if you had something else like a bad guy or something that popped out, there could be other bits used for that. You wouldn't need to recalculate every time. You could just use different parts of the value returned for different things. The problem being, of course, is that if you do that over and over again, then you're essentially tying those events together. And at some point, it might be noticed or noticeable that the flickering of the flame somehow relates to the types of platforms, for example, just to relate it back to Farfall. Depends. You might try it. Maybe it'll work for you, maybe it won't. The great thing is the LFSR calculation is usually not too bad, so you can just bump it more often if you need to. Okay. Well, let's see. Does that cover it? I think so. It's not really that complicated of a technology. If you need more information, definitely check the Wikipedia entry on LFSR or linear feedback shift register. And it's a topic that's covered a lot in computer science sources, and so I'm sure you can find more information if you need to. If it's not obvious, only describe the software, but you can hopefully you can see, if you're a hardware guy at all, hopefully you can see where you could easily implement an LFSR in hardware with actual exclusive OR gates and actual flip-flops, then use that into a hardware pseudo-random number generator. This is used in, say, the noise channel for the SN76489 and some other sound chips from the era. It's a commonly used technique, both in software and hardware. So if you didn't know before, now you know. All right, well, that's probably good enough. Hope I haven't hurt anyone's brain or whatever. And I'll let you go now, but thanks for listening. And, of course, CoCo forever.
This month in CoCo history.
Welcome to This Month in CoCo history, where we explore events in the life of our favorite home computer. I'm Boise Pete, and this month we look back 34 years to the debut of a very special computer. The Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City was buzzing with activity on Wednesday, July 30th of 1986, as Tandy executives prepared to introduce 5 new computers. The Tandy 1000 SX and EX debuted for consumers desiring MS-DOS compatibility, while the Tandy 3000 and the 3000 HL focused on the business end of the PC market. But what stood out for its uniqueness was the Tandy Color Computer 3. Imbued with a palette of 64 colors, high-resolution graphics, and 120K of RAM, and priced at $219.95, the computer was the culmination of years of waiting from dedicated CoCo fans. The rumor mills on Delphi and CompuServe were churning out word of a possible major upgrade just months before, and now it had arrived. Tandy's John Roach stood at the podium to introduce the CoCo 3 to the audience. To the press in attendance, he stated of the machine, quote, "Its incredible price performance, additional memory, and versatility will no doubt make it the choice computer for many professionals, educators, and families," end quote. Also on hand were Mark Siegel and Barry Thompson of Radio Shack to herald the new machine. Rainbow Magazine's publisher Lonnie Falk and managing editor Jim Reed were also in attendance, with the former seen trading notes with Microsoft's Bill Gates. Rainbow columnist Dale Puckett and OS9 users group leaders Bruce Warner and Brian Lance were also on hand to see the new computer in action. Today, the CoCo 3 continues to move around electrons in its 30-plus-year-old innards, delighting young and old alike and beckoning each of us with its glowing green screen and multicolored blinking cursor. The CoCo 3 is indeed forever young.
And that's This Month in CoCo history.
Since 1994, Cloud9 has made cool stuff for your color computer. Now Cloud9 is proud to announce the 2MB Triad Plus memory expansion board. The Triad Plus works in 2 ways. Purchase just the Triad Plus board to expand your Color Computer 3 from 128K to 512K of RAM. Or add the new Protector Plus MMU to access the full 2 megabytes of static RAM aboard the Triad Plus. And the Protector Plus MMU utilizes full buffering to protect your CPU. Unlike previous 2 megabyte memory expansions for the CoCo 3, the Triad Plus operates seamlessly without the need for special patches, configuration, or workarounds. Games like Donkey Kong Remix and Sierra Adventure games simply work without hassle. And the Triad Plus will reduce your CoCo's power consumption and heat generation. The Triad Plus and Protector Plus MMU, only from the innovative engineering of Cloud9. Cool stuff for your color computer. Visit cloud9tech.com for details.
Welcome back to Neil's Corner on episode 62 of the CoCo Crew Podcast. This month I've got something really exciting to talk about. During the months of COVID-19 and being stuck in quarantine, I not only started working on producing CoCo game cartridges, but I started another project in a joint venture with a good friend of mine in the area. This project is called the Gamester. It is a fully featured classic arcade joystick for your Tandy Color Computer 1, 2, or 3, and any Tandy 1000 computers that support the standard DIN-style joystick ports. It will also work on a Dragon, with the supplied adapter upon request to convert the 6-pin into 5-pin for Dragon input. Alright, before I get into details about the Gamester arcade joystick, let me give you a brief backstory. Going back to CoCo Fest 2014, I was talking to John Linville, and I mentioned how jealous I was of his Farfall arcade joystick he got made up special with molded plastic. However, he was kind enough and drew me up a schematic at his booth for wiring up arcade components to a CoCo joystick port. Later on, when I got back home, I was eager to build and test it, but I didn't have any enclosures to build it in. I looked around my shop and found an old wooden cassette tape crate. Well, before you know it, I drilled out some holes and got all the components mounted and wired up in it. It was crude, but it did the job and definitely was good enough for a proof of concept design. And what do you know? It worked perfectly, all but I had the directions reversed. No big deal, I was able to correct the wiring in no time. The following year I took it to CoCo Fest, and I had it on display at my table for people to use. Everyone seemed to really enjoy it, and I even had a few offers to sell it. I decided on keeping it since I knew later on I wanted to enhance it. Well, unfortunately, the years went by, and I wasn't able to find a proper enclosure to build these in because of the clearance you need for the arcade joystick and the buttons. I searched everywhere for project-type boxes, and they either would be too large and bulky, and also didn't look very professional. I didn't want this joystick to look homemade or homebrew. I also looked into 3D printing, but that wasn't the best solution either, with the wait times and imperfections that can arise. So I kind of just shelved this project for all these past years until my friend and I were talking mid-last year about designing a custom enclosure out of wood. Now my friend, he's into professional woodworking, and he could make some amazing furniture and other smaller sized items. He told me no problem, I can work on a design with the dimensions I gave him, but there's only one problem. He needed to finish building and setting up his new wood shop. Luckily he finished it late last year, and he even installed a wood stove in there to keep warm, and he can work through the winter months. Well, January 2020 rolls along, and we were able to get this project off the ground. He came up with a prototype, which we call the Mark II, because the original cassette tape crate one that I made is the Mark I. The Mark II proved to be a success. It was a little on the larger side and didn't have as fancy woodworking, but it did work and was 1,000 times better than the Mark I in my tape case. Suddenly, before we knew it, the pandemic hit in March. We both had a lot more time to work on this project. This is when he created the Mark III. Now at this point, this is where the Gamester joystick really came to fruition of the Mark IV, which is the final product we offer today. It took months of prototyping and scrapping wood to get it just right. Alright, let me describe the Gamester arcade joystick and features as best I can. The stock regular model we are offering is made out of real pine wood, not MDF particle board. With a nice wood-stained varathane finish, the dimensions are 13-inch long, 4.5-inch depth, and 3-inch in height. The joystick components are all high-quality arcade genuine parts. The joystick component is a genuine zippy stick, and the switches are genuine classic red cherry fire buttons. The joystick has 2 fire buttons to support the later CoCo 3 and Tandy 1000 games that use the second button. Another nice feature I incorporated into the design is a modular cable. Because of this, it can also come in custom lengths upon ordering. The standard length is 6 feet. Because it's modular, you never have to worry if it wears out because it can easily be replaced. Absolutely everything that went into making this joystick is super high quality, from the components, switches, wire, and wood plus wood materials. The regular standard model we offer in this exact configuration will be priced at $80. The amount of hours that goes into making one of these, plus materials, believe me, we are not getting rich. This project is definitely a labor of love. It's something I've always wanted to offer to the community because, well, let's face it, the joysticks Tandy provided us aren't really the greatest and are prone to failure over time. The Gamester is built to last and can easily be serviced to keep going for a lifetime of gaming enjoyment. Because this joystick is made to order, we are also offering custom versions. Example, if you'd like an exotic type of wood, or if you'd prefer the joystick left-handed, meaning the joystick on the left and buttons on the right, these are all possible options. Just need to specify before ordering. I will be posting pictures of it on the social media CoCo, Tandy, and Dragon groups. If you do not use social media and would like to see pictures, please feel free to email me at neil@cococrew.org, and I'll be happy to send some pictures along to you. Also, if you have any questions, please send them my way. I tried to talk about and describe everything I could think of on here, but I'm sure I've left something out. Well, there you have it, another piece of quality hardware for your CoCo to improve your game high scores with. Until next month, happy gaming and CoCo forever.
AutoTerm turns your CoCo into the world's smartest terminal. Scroll text forward and backward. Save, load, and delete files while online. Full support for the RS-232 pack, X modem, and even split screen for packet radio. Screen widths of 32, 40, 42, 51, or 64, plus 80 column support for the CoCo 3. Switch instantly to word processing mode. Find strings instantly. Create text. Make corrections, save, or load files. Then upload them to a remote system. Fully compatible with Telewriter, plus full automation tools to automate dialing, keystroke, macros, uploading, and downloading. AutoTerm runs on the CoCo 2 and CoCo 3. No other computer can match your CoCo's intelligence as a terminal. AutoTerm from PXE Computing, Richardson, Texas.
Well, we have reached the end of the podcast. This concludes episode 62. We hope you found it entertaining. Special thanks goes out to our host, John Linville, for procuring all those news articles and providing us with another tech segment. Big thanks to Mike Rowan for painstakingly editing the podcast and creating those super fun commercials. Huge thanks to Boise Pete, our CoCo historian. He remembers it, so you don't have to. Thank you to Fran Purcell for giving us some of your time to record an interview with you. Last but not least, thank you to all who listen and support us each month. We also appreciate your feedback. Until next month, happy CoCoing and retro forever.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo. 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 CoCo.
Dance like there's no tomorrow.
What is this crazy rock and roll music anyway? It's a blast from the past.
Dance, dance, dance. Dance, dance, dance. CoCo.